call a meeting, the City Council special work session for today, February 6th, 2025 at 5 p.m. Let's do the roll.
Mayor Hovland is absent right now. Councilmember Jackson is absent. Councilmember Agnew. Here. Councilmember Risser. Here. Councilmember Pierce.
Here. And today's meeting is really giving a deep dive on budget, as deep as we can in the time that's allotted. So we'll review every service and have each department head be able to talk through their services, how it's structured, and the general cost structure. So with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Councilmember Pierce. We are going to pick up kind of where we left off from Tuesday night. For folks who are going to listen to this recording, I do want to reference that there was something that we did Tuesday night, very similar to what we're doing tonight with police and fire, but there will be two different recordings. So we'll start this. We've got, are you the timekeeper too?
I do have time.
All right. So we're ready to begin with Parks and Rec tonight. Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Again, Perry Vetter, Parks and Recreation Director. I will walk you through our department, our service levels, and the activities that we provide. As indicated on the slide, the Parks and Recreation Department takes up about 13% of the general fund. And really that is in 4 core areas. That's Parks Administration, our recreation programming area. There's a very small amount in the arts and culture. Very, very small. And then park maintenance, which is probably the largest contributor to our budget and also one of our largest staff. When we look at all the additional services that are not included in the general fund, that includes Braemar Golf, Braemar Arena, Centennial Lakes Park, the Edina Aquatic Center, Edinburgh Park, the Edina Liquor, and the Edina Art Center. When we look at Parks and Recreation and we look at what our mission is to the community, it's really to be inclusive and creative. We want to be sustainable and responsible, and we want to be collaborative. And whenever I say the word collaborative in this community, I want to say when possible, right? Because we have a lot of demands from the community, and to tie that back in is a majority of what we do or that we respond to is community driven. We always indicate that we are also in competition for people's discretionary dollars. We do charge fees and charge revenue for our operations, so we are always in that business-like mindset. I'll probably use a couple of other words tonight, and that's priority use. Who gets what, when, and where. Carrying capacity, that's a big thing for me, is how much can we expect a facility, a park, or an operation from a carrying capacity standpoint. And then just as we get through, just kind of expectations and differences. First is just kind of a, when we looked at, or that prior slide, we have 68 full-time employees. So when we look at how those are assigned, where are they assigned, we really kind of have 3 main division heads, and that's Tom Swenson. He's the Assistant Director of Parks and Natural Resources, and his role is to oversee park maintenance, forestry, and natural resources. Tracy Peterson. Tracy is the Assistant Director of Recreation Programming and our Recreation Facility Enterprises. And then Josh Furbish, and Josh is our General Manager of Edina Liquor Operations. There are a lot of other additional people that contribute to our administrative effort. Janet Canton and Sabrina Clark, they provide administrative support for our entire department, and as well as Kirsten McManaman. She works in marketing, and she assists the enterprise divisions for the recreation side and Edina Liquor. Then there's a small indirect, and we always want to point out one of PA's great staff, and that's Mallory Jensfold. And Mallory is very integral to our operations. She's a financial analyst. Her title's probably changed, but you'll see her as well. We work quite closely with Mallory. When we look at the Park Maintenance and Natural Resource Division, under Tom Swenson, again, we have some key people in that aspect. Rachel Finberg, I'm sure you've known her throughout this process. She is assisting on a lot of the local option sales tax projects, a lot of our general fund projects, taking those through the planning process. Another one is Brian Dristy. He's our field supervisor, and Luther Overholt, our city forester. We also have an additional 14 park service workers within the park maintenance division, and Laura Barris is our assistant forester. Tracy's span of control is a little bit wider. When we look at that, it's probably a little tight to see, but Tracy oversees with 2 divisions. She oversees programming. So that is all of our activities, events, special events, all the classes that people register for. And that's mainly planned by 4 individuals. They are 4 recreation programmers, Amanda Clark, Rachel Walters, Nicole Gorman, and Laura Fulton. And they kind of each have their own mix and specialties that they oversee. And then on the enterprise side, I'm sure you've heard Joe Abood oversees Braemar Golf. Jesse Buchholz oversees our arena and sports dome. We currently have no one assigned as a general manager of the Arts Center. As you know, we're in a transition period, and Laura Fulton, she specializes in art programming. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but that from a programmatic sense and not necessarily from an enterprise sense. Tiffany Bushland is our general manager at Centennial Lakes Park, and Patty McGrath oversees both Edinburgh Park and the Edina Aquatic Center with her team. For the Edina liquor operation, obviously there's that, again, indirect line with Mallory and Kirsten. Megan Lunenberg oversees the Grandview store. Kyle Fernandez oversees 50th in France. And Tim Hegenmule oversees Southdale operations. So to start with our service level in provisions, I wanted to start with the park administration. One of the first one that's been keeping us probably the most busy lately is our park planning efforts. Obviously, we are working on not only the local option sales tax, the Edina Aquatic Center, a number of our playground replacements, and the Edina Art Center, Hennepin County projects. So really that does require a high level of engagement, requires additional project time, resources, and techniques to kind of reach out and get all that put together. One thing that we do have our mind on, we've not discussed it as a policy decision yet, but it's really about longer term revenue opportunities related to pursuing sponsorships and naming rights. I know a number of you have talked about philanthropic efforts. That's also part of that as well. But a number of communities, we talked about best practices, are starting to test the waters on naming rights of their facilities. So Elk River, Bloomington, Maple Grove are all testing the waters on that. So again, something to think about more long term. We do have a number of liaison duties within our department. We liaison with the Edina Garden Council, the Historical Society, 14 different athletic associations. There is a Braemar Golf Club, the Morningside Athletic Group, Veterans Memorial. That doesn't actually take a lot of our time, but that is one long-term historic item that we would need to figure out. The Veterans Memorial right now, Bob Coteen is still heading that up, and he is looking for a successor for himself, and I don't believe he's been able to find one. We do meet with community education. A lot of people get us confused a little bit in the community or as part of our role, and we really try to not duplicate efforts with community education. We've talked about that early on. There's no sense in both of us offering a half-full yoga class. So we do have a good relationship with community education that comes down to space, types of programs, things of that nature, that we really try to ensure the community serve, but we're not overlapping with each other. We do work with the 4th of July Committee, as well as our staff that works with the Edinburgh Park Associations, the Centennial Lakes Park Associations, and the Sousa Band. So those are kind of those external associations that we liaison with on a quite regular basis. In addition, our department also has staff liaisons to the Arts and Culture Commission and the Parks and Recreation Commission. We do spend a more amount of time on special events, primarily our own, but also in supporting community-wide ones as well. Oftentimes those do require a lot of work for us to help pull off, and it's kind of, again, about community expectations, and some of those special events are trying to go into locations that, quite frankly, are too small to host that venue. However, the best thing a community event can do is to grow year over year, and then what does it do when it gets too big? Or the resource inputs that we have to put into it. We are also looking a little bit forecasting wise about why are we getting so many requests, And we do believe a lot of those local organizations maybe were hosting their event in a prior community, and they are moving to Edina for a little bit more of that support, security aspect as well. So we're very mindful of that. But when we do look at some of those venues that they're trying to use, really, a lot of those facilities, shelters, buildings, were really kind of the primary design was for neighborhood resident use. So it's a challenge to not get a picnic shelter reservation for your graduation party because it's a special event. So we do try to balance those aspects out. We publish 3 activity directories per year, and that gets sent to every residential unit in Edina. So not just like one per duplex or one per eightplex or one per apartment building, but per unit. So the expectation we have with the Postal Service is if we're sending that directory out, it gets to every apartment unit. Other communities, we kind of listed that as a best practice. Other communities have gone away from that, kind of as a cost-cutting measure. There was a very funny intro in the Plymouth activities directory this year was, we heard you, we're bringing back our full directory. It's not going to be just posted online anymore. So it's really, again, when we think about how we fund a lot of our activities based on registrations, is to get that into households. So that is a great input that we have to try to get that. We have registration next Wednesday. That will be a several $100,000 Wednesday for us. That is our entire, the start to our summer registrations. So those are our big days in our office. I think the council's aware of some of the safety and security things that we work on. Our big things are fire and chemical. You'll hear throughout this presentation about some of the chemical safety concerns that we monitor and are trained for in some of our enterprises. We think about ammonia, chlorides, et cetera, for a pool, for the arena. We talk about fire and severe weather. We talk about active shooter. And then lately, we've also been talking a little bit about the social disruption things that we've shared with the council. We also provide youth scholarships. And we've kind of had an ongoing dialogue with the Edina Community Foundation about trying to raise those limits. And I know the prior executive director, Dick Crockett, was always a little hesitant on could he raise additional money to provide on those scholarships. We've been in a good position where we've not run out of scholarship money from the Edina Community Foundation. However, we do know that as programs exceed, additional children try to get additional access to programs, that is one area where we do see kind of something to solve for the future, I guess you'd say. So that's a little bit about our park admin area. The next we kind of talk about programming. And again, part of that is we have one person who primarily works with our youth athletic associations. And we think about those 14 associations, they're all using either our facilities or our parks. And that's where it kind of gets into priority use, is how do they fall within that priority. If you are involved in youth sports, I hope you take this with a grain of salt. I don't want to insult anyone, but the days of sandlot sports are over. We are not seeing, which is kind of sad, we're not seeing that independent pickup. I mean, it does happen, but we're seeing kids more and more pushed into athletics, and now those athletics are going year-round. Again, those 14 associations, they're all private associations. They are nonprofits, but they do get priority use at our parks. And why we want to deal with one association so we don't have splinter organizations. We don't want to have Edina Basketball West and Edina Basketball East, that we have to find gym space for both. We want to find for just one. But that is something, and you probably hear about it, is just carrying capacity of our parks. Why are athletics in this park? Those are all growing. They're looking for more space. Again, about demands on that. We do adaptive inclusion programs and services. So we do our own programs and services for the community. We do look at that as a little bit of a micro-regional. We partner a lot with Richfield, Bloomington, Eden Prairie when we can. We also hold a contract for Reach Resources, and they provide one-on-one support for any of our participants. Our athletic associations also pay into that as well. So if there was ever a time on a youth softball team when we needed a sign language interpreter because of a participant in the program, we can get that immediately from Reach for Resources. We can provide that service and connect it immediately to help those individuals. Again, we do senior programming. We always say we do 8 to 80, kind of that 8 month to 80. I always joke the worst thing you can do for a senior center is call it a senior center. Because it's active, it's not just, you kind of get this picture in your head of congregate dining and defensive driving and things like that. But these are field trips, they're clubs, they're puzzle clubs. Our staff tries to connect seniors to youth. We just had one volunteer come forward that wanted to build birdhouses for our park. And we kind of asked them, hey, would you want to do that in conjunction with a lot of our service requests from scouting organizations? So we can connect a mentor to someone younger in the child, and we can make that connection. So we maintain that. We do all of our park building and shelter rentals through our office. As you know, we don't rent all of those, just based on facility condition and type. So there really isn't an equitable approach throughout the city of where those are. They are mainly those newer shelters that we do rent for people. And again, those all have size requirements and different times of the day and rates. And then we do outdoor ice skating. And that's been really in the last several years, but a little bit more evident lately is, I'll talk a little bit throughout the presentation about climate impacts, climate change. And that is really something that we do need to kind of keep in mind. I always say I do not want to be the Parks and Recreation Director that, backed off on hockey, right? That's not a good thing to say in this community, but it's a reality that we are seeing these trends, and it's not just us, so. Which kind of leads us into the Park Maintenance Division. Again, Tom Swenson's area. We do a lot of things in this area, disease, tree, and weed inspection. That's one of our state statutes. So if you remember the first meeting in January, the mayor is designated our weed inspector for the city, and then we delegate that task to Tom. That comes from a state statute. So that is really enforcing that ordinance of long grass, diseased trees, things of that nature.
I thought that was a joke.
It's real.
When it came up. That's
Yep.
good to know.
Yep.
Every city in Minnesota has.
I'm not sure when it started or what the rationale was, but we also do tree protection ordinance review. Obviously, that's in conjunction with the building department as part of permitting. We do tree storm damage removal. Again, when we talk about climate change, this was a very rough summer for tree damage. And those high winds, wet soils is something that we're really looking at. We do our own forestry programs. We were grateful as part of the ARPA funds to do the Next Generation Tree Program that planted 1,000 trees within our park and open spaces areas. And then again, we do turf management, building management, and also playground safety inspections, just to make sure you know that. That is one thing you'll see at the end that we have invested in our staff in to conduct those. There are certifications to conduct those about age, type, structure, fall hazards, etc. And we do have additional staff that are trained in that. So not only are we inspecting existing, but also as new replacements are coming in to kind of do that verification to stay up on those.
Hey, Barry,
Yeah.
can you just briefly context for parks of what you're considering best practice when we read through these?
Yeah. So there aren't a lot of industry standards. They're very localized. So when we look at turf management, there isn't a prescribed thing that says, what we do as a best practice is we do chemical treatments for weeds only on our athletic fields and our high priorities. We do not do them in neighborhood parks. One, for an expense side, but also from putting down chemicals. So there's no industry standard that says that, but for us, that's a local best practice. When we look at playground safety inspections, you could do that once a year and be compliant. We do them on a much more frequent basis, not only when we repair, but also in advance. So, and so things like that where there are standards, but there's not a set one.
Executing above and beyond whatever the various standard may or may not be.
Or customized to your local area.
Okay, thanks.
One thing that not a lot of communities do is we do operate a greenhouse. It's very valued by the Edina Garden Council. We are in the process. We have an employee who, after 41 years of really operating the greenhouse, is retiring this spring. So we'll be transitioning on that. That's a big change for us to have a new person come in and work with that organization. Snow plowing of parks and trails. So we really do only the trail system in Edina. Public Works takes care of the sidewalk system, but we do local trails. We also do park buildings, park shelter parking lots, etc. So that's kind of in addition to that hockey rink season. So Saturday's going to be a rough day for all of us, I think, because we're going to try to get things plowed, but we're trying to get rinks open, so it'll be interesting. Ice skating rink maintenance, again, a best practice of ours, which is not what other communities do, is we maintain ice 7 days a week. Not a lot of communities do that. Some only do it 5 days a week, some do it 6. Here in Edina, we do it 7 days a week. And then just one it's really hard to put in a chart, but it's just really about operational capacity for our staff. And we'll talk about it at the end with one of the studies we have, but if you can imagine two bell curves, one a little bit shorter and one a little bit bigger. And I always say those bell curves, for the shorter one is our winter season. The taller bell curve is our summer season. That's really about the responsibility we have, the tasks we have. Is summer is so much higher than winter. So we try to set that operational capacity kind of around that winter level. And then as you carry with like our full-time staff, as you look to summers, then we have to supplement that. So that's either through contracts, hiring seasonals, etc. The one thing that does worry about, that I do worry about in that sense is with some of these changes in our climate is, we used to, I always used to joke, is we wouldn't let people on our athletic fields until we mowed once, and that was always mid-May. Now, that bell curve is so much wider. So instead of thinking we can do that in May, it's really early April. And that other bell curve is not just, Labor Day, it's getting into October. And those shoulder seasons, as we call them, are getting busier and busier when we don't have access to those seasonal staff. So that's one thing from just an operational capacity that does worry a little bit long-term is, those seasons are getting earlier. I think we've opened up the golf course in early April. We've opened it up in late March. We've had athletic field use in late March. So those things which used to be May are now coming earlier and they're staying later. Then we also do athletic field maintenance as well. Braemar Golf. So now I think we hit the term where we're no longer in the general fund. About our service levels is Braemar Golf. Again, that's maintaining our course conditions, the agronomy, the horticulture, all at Braemar Golf. And it's really for the Championship 18, the Academy 9, and the driving range. And then 3 main buildings that we do maintain out there. So the course clubhouse itself, the Academy 9 building, and then the Golf Dome building. And then we also maintain the courtyard as well. As part of kind of some of the programming aspects out at the golf course as well is we do have a series of golf professionals out there that really have grown our lesson programs. They've grown our youth programs, and it's really been it was a good decision to move them from contracted staff to internal staff. So there's no longer a disconnect between who's registering who's got lessons, those types of things. So it's really done well. We also do community programming at the golf course. So it might be lawn bowling. We do a lot of family nights out there as well. We tried to do some snowshoeing this winter. We had it scheduled. They turned into hikes. Maybe after this weekend we can go back. We also are a league host facility. So we have 18 different leagues at Braemar Golf, and we have condensed them. We did condense some of the non-internal groups. So we always had internal leagues that we didn't oversee, but they were kind of the traditional ones. A lot of those private leagues we've phased out just to create additional capacity for tee times. That was one of our great complaints was people could not get on the course. So we did make some of those changes to allow a little bit more public access in addition to that. But and then we've capped our leagues because we kept seeing like, well, if I can't get on the golf course, I'll just join a league. So, we're also we do golf retail. We do host a lot of outings. A lot of those, for our priority, are nonprofits. So think of the Chamber of Commerce and other events that we have out there. And then we do hold a food and beverage contract at Braemar Golf. We do not do food and beverage ourselves. So we hold that contract with Red River Kitchen through Lancer Catering. Braemar Arena, obviously operating the building and dome. We do our own equipment maintenance. We do program and event coordination. I think maybe you saw it in the Friday report a couple of nights ago. The Edina High School girls team set the record by having the most people come to a game. It was like 2,149 people per game. That was on a Friday night. Just to let you know, Saturday and Sunday were busier. I mean, when those events happen, that puts a tremendous amount of stress on the infrastructure and the staff. And then just, we do our own concessions, we do our own snow and ice removal, and we're very mindful of energy management out there. We work very closely with Chad's staff in the past on just energy efficiency upgrades and monitoring those use. And that's when we kind of get to, priority use expectations. When we kind of talk about the arena, that is one thing that we do need to have kind of that long-term dialogue is, from our perspective, we are set to operate an arena. When it comes to our users, they would like to see more of that event center operation, right? So when we see these events and tournaments come in that we are a host for, that does put a lot of stress on that system. Just to continue, again, the safety and security, when we look at emergency protocols, we have a tremendous amount at the arena just because we are a facility that uses ammonia. So we no longer have any natural gas equipment. That was a phase out. So everything from Zambonis to shavers are all electric now. So we don't have to worry about that. And then again, just, maintaining ice and equipment. Next, we'll jump over to Centennial Lakes Park. We did do a deep dive with the council a couple of years ago on that. But again, probably our, everyone has their own crown jewel. I think, most of us kind of feel that Centennial is the crown jewel of Edina. That staff there works on tree and turf maintenance. They also maintain that building. One of the, major programmatic senses is the putting course down there. So just maintaining a natural grass putting course conditions. One of the big things down there too that people really appreciate is the horticulture investment that we've made over the years. And then, again, like everyone else, snow plowing and walking trail maintenance. A little bit more about Centennial Lakes, the skating rink maintenance. I'll talk a little bit more about how they're being impacted by that as well. We do an entertainment series down there. So we do about 85 concerts per year at Centennial Lakes Park. And we do offer a small stipend to some of those bands, anywhere from $150 to $200 to bring them in. So we won't solve the starving artist quote, but we do feel like they do bring a great value to the community down there. And we also do paddleboat rentals. If you've been down there over the last year, we've added to the fleet through the ARPA program. We now have swans, and I don't know if the gray ducks are there yet or if they will be unveiled next spring, but
Swans were really popular this year.
they were extremely popular, yeah. Every Thursday night in the growing seasons, we have a farmer's market. We always try to pair that up with music as well, food trucks, that is very popular. Building rentals, we still do a fair number of those as well. The wedding industry as itself has changed. It really changed after COVID. Kind of in the midst of that, things went very intimate. Now it seems to be that we are not a big enough venue for weddings. Big weddings are back again, so it's always kind of a little bit of a moving target, as well as corporate rentals. More corporations, I think, because they are not hosting all of their staff in one location anymore, aren't doing as many team building or meeting events that they have, or through their corporate headquarters, they've invested in their own system, so they're not coming on site. So that is a little bit of a change. And then we do have a lot of public art stations in Centennial Lakes Park. They are not all full. We've had a number of recent donations by members of the community to add art to Centennial Lakes Park. But that is something that we're always kind of keeping our eye on, and that is for, when it comes to public art, the staff that hosts that piece is responsible for the maintenance of that piece. So I know CLP staff right now is working with a number of artists to have them come back and repair some of those pieces that have gone on. The next is the Edina Aquatic Center. To this point, everything has kind of been that year-round operation. The Edina Aquatic Center is a short, very intense operation. So when we think about, June into August, that 12, 13-week period, that is very intense for us. So through state statute, we do have ways that we are required to handle chemical operations. I think we don't need to revisit the condition of the pump room. You've discussed that over the last month or so. But we do our own cleaning custodial functions, the decks, the grounds. We do charge admission there. So we do season passes. We do daily passes. Last year, we introduced a pass package. So we always heard about, can we have a half a season or a quarter season pass? And it just never really worked out. So this year, last year and this coming year, we'll actually have a pass pack. So you can buy X amount of admissions. This way you can take your cousin that came into town to visit you. Grandma and grandpa want to take you. You don't have to be on a season pass. So it's kind of in a way to kind of get people to continue coming to the Aquatic Center that don't want to buy a season pass. And we don't want to lose them long-term by relying on just a daily admission. So looking at that. For safety and lifeguarding, there is no state statute on that, but there are two mechanisms that you can use, and that's Red Cross or Ellis Lifeguarding. And because of the type of aquatic center we have, the type of amenities we have, we use Ellis Lifeguarding standards, which means we have to do annual training, not just over a 2-year training session. And the techniques are wildly different than Red Cross. So Red Cross is kind of the traditional, I watch a pool, I watch people swim. Ellis Lifeguarding, because of the deep water slides, the flow water, if you're at the aquatic center, you will see our staff scanning and moving. If they're on the zero depth area, you see them walking to scan and move. So we have some people in stands, we have other people moving and walking. So that rotation is required by the type of aquatic center we have. So we do see, a greater challenge in recruitment because we have to also put people through training, and that training does only last for the one season. And again, we'll talk about seasonal staff, but that alone, we hire about 60 to 70 lifeguards a year. So when we think about that amount of people to hire for that short window of period, it is intense. We do rentals there, so we've tried to do group free Friday, but we do Monday through Thursday. So various other YMCAs, community education, other nonprofit groups will come and come into there. We do our own concession operations, we do our own programming, we do try to do a lot of events for our season pass holders, and adjacent to the aquatic center is the playground on top of the hill that is connected, so that staff does maintain that site. The art center, obviously, without the facility functioning to where we want it, we are just doing art programming at this sense. So we're using only the first floor of the art center. We're not doing pottery, and we are distributing our art programming across the community. So we've hosted art camps at Fred Richards. We're using a lot of the park buildings and shelters. We're doing things at the senior center. So we're not just reliant upon one location right now, but we're distributing programming throughout. So that has its own challenges about, trying to get easels to one location, make sure we can have them. Right now, we're not using the park shelters because they're warming houses. So then we'll go back in the spring. So just until we can get to, having an operating arts center, that's where we need to be. And then Laura also works a lot with public art and the Arts and Culture Commission. So when you think about some of the things they've done in the past through the Arts and Culture Commission's virtual gallery, doing the utility box wraps, et cetera, throughout the community, that was kind of all spearheaded under here. Next is Edinburgh Park, and just a reminder, Patty and her team oversees the Aquatic Center and Edinburgh Park. So just they do those building operations. It is a very unique facility when you think about just the structure of it. It has 3 shared wall partners, from the corporate center to the assisted living facility to the former hotel, now apartment. So when you think about it, those are all shared walls and shared associations that we connect with. There's the gym, the pool, the track, and then the play park and the amphitheater. Again, mechanical and chemical operations, because it's a chlorine facility, we have special protocols there. We also do public use, so we do swim club rentals there. So that's one of our associations. They do use that as one of their, I wouldn't say primary locations, but one of their locations for their association. We do a lot of birthday parties. There's a lot of frosting and a lot of cake to clean up at the end of the night, but that is really what you can expect there. Is we do have a couple of plateaus in the building. We do a lot of birthday parties. Again, an entertainment series throughout the year. There's daytime youth. There's Sunday night adults. It's a big location every year for the Sousa Band's concert. We'll do our exterior grounds and maintenance, again, with 3 shared walls and partners. We always try to keep those lines clean for who's responsible for what. And then we also do community programming there. We don't necessarily have a community center in Edina, per se, for Parks and Recreation to use, but we do use Edinburgh Park to try to do that. So we'll have a variety of programming there. Tonight, there is an activities expo there. So we are hosting all of our associations, community education, a lot of the nonprofits in Edina, to have a table. People can come see what they're offering for the summer, whether it be classes, camps, programs, and get a better idea. So not just our own programs, but what's in the community. So you can expect a lot of things like that also happen at Edinburgh Park. Edina Liquor, that is one of our additional state statutes. So one of the 4 things that are there, and I always remind staff of why did municipal liquor come to Edina, and that was when the referendum vote to have that came on, is people were concerned about the compliance verification and safety controls, right? And that was one of the messages during the referendum about 75 years ago. So really that's our main driver there, is age and eligibility verification compliance. So we often get calls about, I'm well over 21 years old, why did you card me? And there's a new state statute. If you flip it over, a lot of people don't know that, but there are certain individuals that are not allowed to purchase alcohol, and they would have that on the back of their identification card. So it's not just about age, it's also about eligibility for us. We do offer e-commerce, so that's online ordering and delivery. Very straightforward. Retail sales. Again, we follow state statute on how we go about doing that. We have those 3 store locations of Grandview, Southdale, and 50th in France. We sell beer, wine, spirits, THC drinks, non-alcoholic, and related products. And then something that we do really as a kind of a quality of life thing in the community, we do tasting and educational events. So, we do the holiday event where you can taste wine and you can order. We do a summer sip. We'll do whiskey classes. Types of those things on kind of a special events and education program. The next is just kind of getting into those cost drivers and kind of a little bit of a reminder. This may not look familiar to you, but this was, we did kind of that deep dive on Centennial Lakes Park, and that is the HRA contracts that were established in the establishment of Centennial Lakes Park. So as a reminder, those were 30 years with an automatic 10-year renewal. Those would be on the horizon then for expiration. And a number of those continue based on the timing, and I do believe the Coventry homes voluntarily extended out to 2040. However, some of the major ones, the South Office Park, the Retail Plaza, Pinstripes, and the Medical Office Building, no longer have an automatic renewal. So that would have to be negotiated if they were to do that. But those go through 2028, and then they would expire. So just a reminder on that one as part of this presentation. The next is in 2021, Public Works, Facilities, and Park Maintenance overtook an organizational assessment of kind of needs and changes. So from the park maintenance and park side of things, one of the things was to improve our turf management and rink maintenance, and for our entire division, not just in those two areas, was to add 3 FTEs. We've not done that since 2021. Another recommendation, or 3 other recommendations, were to look at our winter ice rink maintenance calendar, how we schedule. We did make modifications to that. We did purchase the equipment. And again, I kind of mentioned it before, but we did invest in training for our playground safety inspection program. Defining our park maintenance and service levels, that's kind of an ongoing. We don't ever want to kind of establish that and rest. We're always looking at new ways, new standards, or what those impacts are. And then really to monitor our forestry staffing as we look at the tree ordinance and its implementation. So 1 we haven't checked off, 3 we have, 2 are kind of in a continuous improvement review. And then the last is just 1 slide, but it's got 12 things on it. So I'll try to go through. It's really just some other things that we really kind of want to make sure you're aware of. And really, I don't think you need me to spend a lot of time on this, but just facility condition and our aging infrastructure. I think you've seen all those presentations. But just one thing I wanted to make sure that if you didn't know, but our enterprise rolling vehicles are not in the general fund equipment replacement. So those have to be funded by the enterprises. As you know, a lot of those are targeted for to break even or less to be supported. So a lot of that equipment is not being replaced. If you remember a couple of months ago, the arena bought a Bobcat from the Public Works Division. So we brought that to you as a purchase request. So just as you go through this, a lot of those are not included in that. I know you are all very supportive of looking at those alternative funding mechanisms, whether they be philanthropic or other types of things. I did mention, a lot of communities are looking at some of those long-term sponsorship naming rights aspects, so monitoring that. Climate change. I think we were in probably a meeting a while ago, and it was like, we are no longer preparing, we are being impacted. So just a couple of things that you should know of how we are impacted and what it means to run something on revenue and when you can't. So the last 2 years, our highest revenue weeks for Centennial Lakes Park are always between Christmas and New Year's. Kids are off of school, people are taking time off, it's a very busy time. The last 2 years, we did not have ice. We had open water, so it wasn't like we weren't ready, we had open water. We normally net about $70,000 per week over that time frame. So the last 2 years, we did not generate $140,000. Skate rentals, concessions, all the types of events that are down there. So just so you know, those are the types of things that we can no longer count on. It's kind of going to have to be a variable. Also at Centennial Lakes Park this year, well, just first, I know we all felt it because it was kind of like, what happened to the temperature and now why am I not wearing a long sleeve jacket? Was we had a 65-degree temperature swing over 9 days in January. And Centennial Lakes Park had 15 inches of ice underneath the pedestrian bridge on January 27th. We measure ice daily, and this is why.
What does that mean?
We drill a hole, and we measure how much ice thickness we have to make sure it can support people or equipment if we're maintaining.
Okay.
On January 27th, we had 15 inches of ice. The next day, we had open water. So that's why Centennial Lakes Park is not open for skating, because we don't have it frozen solid enough. So when you think about that change, not just that 65 degrees, but that allowed runoff to come in, high chlorides. We have moving water underneath the ice because it's a living body. There's organics that are off-gassing under there. So again, that climate perception of what's going on is there. And, you know, we're always working with Brian and his team every spring. We're kind of in this, you know, is the creek going to overflow, or where are we going to put water, and where's it going to go? You know, for us, that traditionally means we're canceling games. We're pushing back on a schedule. You know, our fields aren't ready. So that always happens kind of in that springtime. And then the last couple of summers, by August, you know, you know, the DNR's got us on a watch list. Do we need to shut our irrigation off, right? So, so that push and pull is really happening to us. Frontline seasonal staffing, that is a huge thing for us, is to continue to be able to recruit those people. You know, you can't just say it's kids anymore, right? Because we're 7 days a week, sometimes 18 hours a day. We are some people's second job, and we recognize that. Right now, when I open up my my employee dashboard, we have about 330 people that are on active payroll right now. They don't all work every day. They don't all work every week. But you know, you take off our 65 full-time staff, that gets into that 200 plus just over the winter. You know, people working at the Gulf Dome, at the arena, at Edinburgh, ice rink attendants. That number can swell up into that 480 in the summer. So thinking about, again, we work with Kelly's team quite a bit, just on, you know, paperwork, getting people activated. We work with Jennifer's team on employee recruitment efforts. So it's really, we are you know, reliant on that, but frontline seasonal staffing is the big thing for us and getting them trained. You know, we're grateful. We're working with the Axtel group on our social disruption, our safety and security blueprint. That's going really well. Predicting future use patterns, right? I get this question all the time. What's the next pickleball? What do we need to be ready for? And I don't know yet. But it'll be here and we'll find out, right? Growing demands and perception gaps. You know, I talked a little bit about, you know, the arena and how, you know, we operate an arena, but at some times we're an event center. We do get that from our associations all the time. And that is, you know, kind of said, a lot of our stuff is community driven. We get a lot of demands from that, you know, and that translates into requests, you know, that come up to you. Again, servicing and prioritizing residents, partners, and patrons, we always want to take care of them, right? I'd rather have that graduation party for someone that lives here than a special event, right? So how do we prioritize use? Again, the importance of municipal liquor. They support a lot of our operations. Another thing we're looking at, again, is those art center operations, not for 26, but that latter half 27 going into 2028. You know, it's not in the near term, but eventually we'll have to replace the artificial turf at Pamela and Braemar. Those are holding up very well. We do impact attenuation testing we do it twice a year at those locations. So while we may infill, you know, the crumb rubber, you know, those turfs are holding up. One of the concerns, though, long term, is Minnesota has very stringent PFAS rules. And that is a major hiccup in the turf industry right now, because you have to prove that PFAS was not artificially added to the process. And no one can determine with the Minnesota PCA what certification you need to show that it wasn't artificially added. The National Recreation and Park Association with the state of California did a multi-year study in artificial turf, and they've deemed it safe from an impact standpoint, from a crumb rubber standpoint, everything. It was a very comprehensive study we were all waiting for. But here in Minnesota, we're not quite sure how to navigate this new law on PFAS. And then again, eventually, not anytime soon, but we will have to replace the sports dome at Braemar Arena. So that's kind of a quick overview. That took an hour of what we operate at 6 different locations throughout the city, and some of our long-term concerns and drivers that we see on the horizon.
So when we have the subsequent conversation, are we gonna be able to see, which of these are revenue generating and which ones we have like a net loss on, so that we can start to like stack some of those numbers too? Yeah,
we actually use 2 numbers in there. We do a management cost recovery and a total cost recovery. And it's really, the management one is what you can control. Your staffing costs, your revenue, and then the total cost is everything else that goes into the ACFR, the pension liability, central services, investment income, things of that nature. So.
Okay, thank you.
And we do call out those factors in our quarterly financial reports.
I know there's rules about what we can and cannot do for fundraising as a municipality, but just thinking about overall sustainability, and yeah, that dome is going to have to be replaced, and we do need to replace the pump. I mean, is there any way there could be a sign at the pool saying your dollars do not go to much needed maintenance or something? I don't know. I mean, it just seems like this is a huge issue, and we need to raise public awareness of it.
I would agree. We have a lot of expensive infrastructure. Probably not as much as these 2 take care of, but it's specialized, it's unique, and a lot of it is in need of repair. I'd have to look to see what that would partake. I don't know how. I know city staff cannot try to fundraise, right?
Exactly.
That's pretty clear.
Right.
But as the council's mentioned and the Parks Commission is looking at, is what does that look like from a philanthropic effort? And I think former Mayor Metzold said it well, is an Edina Crime Prevention Fund for the parks.
Yeah.
I think the underlying principle though is on your first slide, you had 68 FTEs. Those 68 FTEs are supporting regional services. Mm-hmm. And Braemar is one of those, right? And so as a community, we're funding and keeping up those services that are providing a regional benefit. And so absolutely, after we go through this process and we've made decisions on services and the revenue model here and there and how we're going to fund different things, we are going to come out, we have to come out with a story so that people understand why we're making certain decisions. And I think what you're bringing up, right, fits not only here, you've got a lot of these enterprise services, but those aren't the only ones we have. So
one thing that's not there that maybe should be is how much we're doing right now with the sales tax too, and long-term, how do we, replace that in the future? Is that another regional supported initiative, or is it something that locally we have to figure out how to do capital maintenance on? So that's not a short term, but think about that long term too, of what the sales tax is benefiting the system, hopefully for a long time.
Yeah, I said this before in my career, as I would love to get to a point where it's don't ever let this happen again, right? And how do we set up that long-term mechanism so it doesn't happen again?
Because we can't keep doing it this way. And I appreciate the information that you provided and also that we got at the work session. However, I feel like this is information that should be made available to the public as a whole, maybe under some very easy to access site. And this is really incredibly basic information. And we're going to, in order to, we're staring at a potential 17% property tax. And I know budget is not I wish I knew what you two knew about budget processes, because I feel like I'm a little out of my area, but as I get this information, it's helpful on a super, super general level, but how do I get from this super, super general level to where I need to be to make those decisions? And that makes me a bit nervous. Also, the idea, and this was presented at the work session, that we're supposed to hold our questions until the March retreat. I don't understand that.
Yeah, no, I don't think the goal was to hold questions if you have clarification ones. We wanted to make sure that we're gonna go through and time-wise, to get through all these presentations, to make sure that we're not here until after midnight. And the goal was to, instead of you saying right now, Perry, I wanna change the ice rink flooding schedule, that type of like feedback, hold the feedback. But if you have a question about how something works, we should ask that, and we'll also have the opportunity after we're done with this, then we're gonna have like a follow-up conversation to get some feedback from you of what are the things that you wanna talk about more in March, in the interim, so.
Because that's good, because the dialogue has to continue. It can't just be truncated and then, oh, remember back in February.
Oh, yeah, no.
Okay, good.
All right.
Yeah, because I wouldn't be able to answer a question right now of how should we replace the dome fabric 9 years from now, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's more of the, let's get there, let's build it, or.
We should move on to Public Works, right?
Do you wanna, see it, I already have it? The clicker? There you go. Yep.
Okay. Well, this is an interesting slide, and I just wanted to make sure to point out that the 8.28% that's in general maintenance is really the staffing component of our operation. And the reason I say that is because what I'm going to talk about in a second is that general maintenance is not necessarily. So what happens is we do snow and ice removal. When we do snow and ice removal, they code their time to snow and ice removal, and then it gets billed to that. In the budget, it's originally in the general maintenance. And the reason I say that is because, and I like the term that Perry used, operational capacity. Our operational capacity is based upon our winter use as well. Our full-time complement is based upon our snow plowing ability to plow 486 lane miles of streets and sidewalks and parking ramp maintenance every single time it snows. The one thing I will say about snow plowing, it is the only emergency service that we provide that touches the lives of every single resident every single time it happens. And I think that's why they've dedicated so much time and energy and equipment and manpower to make it happen. Our snow plowing is second to none in the state of Minnesota and is comparable in the top 10 in the nation. We are very good at what we do. I'll talk a little bit about our organization. We have 2 assistant public works directors. One that oversees, his name is Dave Gorgon, oversees the asphalt and concrete street supervisors, as well as the 2 administrative support specialists. We have a receptionist at front desk that of Public Works that handles all the incoming traffic from all of the 3 departments that operate out under the Park and Public Works maintenance facility. We have 12 public workers that are asphalt street primarily. We have 7 public service workers that are in the concrete division, 3 traffic safety specialists, and 14 utility operators. 70% of our total costs are paid for by the enterprise facilities, the stormwater, water, and sanitary sewer utilities. And so even though they don't have a direct impact on the general fund, I wanted to make sure that I included some of the services that they provide as well. Snow plowing, as I mentioned, our mission statement is to provide the best public service that we possibly can. and do that as efficiently and effectively as possible. We currently have 25 plow routes for 486 lane miles of streets. We have 5 sidewalk routes that handle, let's see, where did that? A total of 71.55 miles of sidewalks. And so that's a total of 25 plus 5, and then there's 2 staff members that do the parking ramps down at 50th and France. It's hard to say that each snow event is got a certain number of hours after we start to when we complete, because every storm is different. And so in a 2-hour time frame, or I mean a 2-inch snowfall event, it takes us about 6 to 8 hours to get through the entire city with that staffing level. When you talk about 6 to 8, maybe 8 to 10 inch snowstorm, which doesn't happen terribly often, but it generally, prior to these last couple of years, it was happening at least 3 or 4 times a year. Those types of events would require us to be out there for probably 14 to 16 hours to get it complete. I worked in a community that had a service level like that prior to here. I won't mention any names, but I can tell you that the number of phone calls that we got when people went to work, came back, and still hadn't had their streets plowed was astounding. And so I will tell you that Edina does it correctly and bases all of their full-time staff complement on the snow plowing service. And so what I'm telling you, a lot of what we do is seasonal in nature. One of the reasons why Perry and I had a conversation about climate change was because it doesn't necessarily impact us from a revenue producing perspective. It just means that we can't be as efficient as we typically are, because we might be doing pothole repair in February because of the change of temperatures. And so, again, it doesn't necessarily mean that we aren't busy. It means that we're just doing different seasonal activities. So I want to talk a little bit about equipment maintenance and fleet repair. There is 5 mechanics that we have. We actually have a 6th mechanic right now. That is one of the biggest challenges that we had. We had about 3 people that departed our equipment operations division through retirement and or internal transfer. It took us nearly 2 years to get those back in place. The one challenge that we had was that the private sector mechanic makes way more than the public sector mechanic, and we went through interview processes month after month where we'd have one candidate. It just wasn't very easy. So we do have a 6th mechanic at this point. We put him on because we know that there's a retirement coming up, and there was 2 pretty good potential employees, and so we capitalized on that because we knew we had to catch up, because there was a period of almost 2 years where we had limited amount of mechanics and we were falling way behind. So the intention is when and if someone leaves, we will not replace that mechanic. So it wasn't mentioned in here. The fuel consortium, we purchase fuel for all of the departments of the city. We enter into the fuel consortium. The fuel consortium is run by the state of Minnesota, but it requires us to have a monthly volume that we get, minimum monthly volume that we get. We have 2 10,000-gallon tanks down at the Public Works and Park Maintenance facility. We generally have 4,500 gallons of diesel that we order every month, and 7,000 gallons of unleaded fuel. And so again, we provide all of the fuel for the city departments. Street maintenance, as I mentioned, there's 486 lane miles of roads in the city. Street maintenance includes pothole repair, it includes crack sealing, street sweeping, our mill and overlay program, our mill and overlay program. I can talk at greater lengths near the end when I talk about some of the challenges, but also some of the successes that we've had. So the mill and overlay program, I guess I'll get a little into it right now. We have, and I'm going to jump to the last slide. When I first came here in 2012, our pavement condition index, and this is both the same year that Chad started, we kind of put our heads together and we looked at our pavement condition index. Pavement condition index is based upon a score from 0 to 100. Our score was 51. There are a few people that think 51 is a good score in a chemistry exam in college, but we certainly didn't think that that was a good score. And so, as you can see on the graph on the right, or upper right, that's when our infrastructure was originally installed at year 0. We are currently in the decade or the generation where we need to commit to reinvest because they're coming due of age and need to be replaced, which generally means that it needs more maintenance until it gets replaced. Chad and I kind of put our heads together, and our theoretical street pavement life goes year 0 construction, year 23 is when you do the first overlay, year 41 is the second overlay, and then that gets you to year 55 to 60. In the past, they were doing overlays in the worst streets because that would decrease the amount of potholes that they would have to do, but it was like throwing money away. And we knew that. The asphalt in a street is no different than the asphalt on the top of your roof. You can put another layer on top, you can put another layer on top, but finally you got to rip it all off and start over again. And so we've made significant strides in this, and in fact, this is an older graph. In 2024, we were at a pavement condition index of 78. So that was why we recommended reducing the budget for a half mile, but still continue on with the mill and overlay program. Again, our operational capacity is based on winter. In the summer, we have the same challenges as Perry does in terms of hiring seasonal staff. That seasonal staff, we're finding, is much more apt to get a job at McDonald's than shovel asphalt for the summer. Sometimes I don't blame them for that because it can be quite a hot experience, but we literally are having a really hard time getting people during the summer. So I'll continue on with service summary. We do retaining wall repairs. Again, we're kind of in the reactive mode with retaining wall repairs because we have retaining walls that were normally built along with our infrastructure. At this point, we are reactively repairing the walls that are failing. We do have some CIP dollars that are allowing us to proactively replace some very big 2-tier walls and walls that we wouldn't be able to impact with our budget, and so we're doing some good things there. Sidewalk maintenance, as we've talked about, there's 123 total miles of trails and sidewalks. Of that, 71 miles are maintained by us, 24, almost 25 miles maintained by residents, 13.28 miles maintained by other departments, primarily the park and maintenance division. I will mention that in terms of our snow and ice removal, I think Perry didn't mention that they do provide one of our employees to do the streets. I think that's been for the last 40 years or so, and that was a bargain that was struck long ago when they were talking about who was gonna do like the arena. We go through there with some big front end plows, to try to get as much as we can out of there so that they can get people in as quick as possible, just in the main parking lot. But at the end of the day, we do trade services back and forth and work together in that regards. Sign maintenance, as with 486 miles, we have thousands of streets that have, thousands of signs that need to be replaced or repaired when accidents occur, or are just simply not reflective enough. You've probably seen signs as you're driving down the highway that sometimes are splotchy or at night are hard to read. That's because the retroreflectivity hasn't been replaced. The coating on the signs needs to be taken off and replaced. Unlike some communities, especially smaller communities, we have the ability to make our own signs. The only signs that we really buy are the signs that are mass produced, like stop signs and yield signs, and you can get them cheaper than you can make them. But we do have our own sign making machine, and we do have the ability to make every sign that's included in the manual and uniform traffic control devices. Pavement marking maintenance. Again, when I first started here, we were painting everything in latex. Latex paint is good in that it's easy to clean up, and it looks good fresh when it's installed, but it doesn't last nearly as long as other versions of paint. So what we've started is a program. There were times where we would literally have to replace crosswalks that are painted in latex 3, sometimes 4 times a year in the high traffic volume areas. We have over 1,000 crosswalk blocks in the city of Edina, and we continue to rise with that number because of the different sidewalks that get installed and making the community more walkable. Now we use thermoplastic. Thermoplastic installation requires a lot more upfront time and effort because you grind that plastic, if you will, down into the pavement so that it doesn't get taken off with the first snowplow, and it's recessed a little bit and it's melted right into the top layer of the asphalt. That allows us at least 5 to 7 years of length of time before we have to replace it again, which means then we're not going back to the same location over and over and over again. Minor bridge repair and minor parking ramp maintenance. Minor bridge repair revolves around crack sealing on the deck. It involves some guardrail replacement occasionally, but mostly it's graffiti removal. It's painting over graffiti, maybe putting a fresh coat of paint on a guardrail, or vegetation removal around the base of the bridge. Minor repair of boulevards and sprinklers due to plow damage. I would love to say we never hit anybody's sprinkler system or sod, but I know that's not the case. We do put out curb markers and areas where there's significant curves that wouldn't be expected, but we can't put them everywhere, and there's just, depends on the depth of the snow that we have when we originally go out. Generally later in the season, curb lines are already defined because they've been plowed multiple times, but it happens. We do hit private property and sprinkler systems, so we spend the first month of the season doing repair of those boulevards. Resident requests, we handle those on a day-to-day basis. Those can rank, or they can be anything from a sign got hit to sod damage that needs to be repaired in the spring to I got them somewhere. Oh, could be, yeah, there they are. Sign obstructed, so if vegetation grows across the sign, it has to be, taken down. Clear view obstructions. We get a lot of day-to-day service requests from the utility area. The utility area is mostly like low water pressure, water meters that are, they feel are vibrating, or there could be a lot of different reasons why they call us in from the utility perspective. Catch basins that are failing, flooding, localized flooding, a lot of those things. So again, I mentioned that I was going to talk a little bit about the enterprise facilities, in that they do provide snow plowing. Of the 14 public service workers that are on the utilities division, 10 of those do a plow route. The mechanics provide backup to both the streets and utilities side too, so they can have as many as 3 or 4 as backup. And streets, there's 22 total street employees, and with 37 different plow routes that we have, it is clear that we cannot do the job just with concrete or asphalt street employees. So of those 22 employees, there's only 4 that can sign out during any week during the winter months between November and April. And then it's all weighted on seniority. Sewer cleaning. We have about 180 miles of sanitary sewer main. We televise, and we clean a fifth of those sewer mains every year, and we televise a tenth of the sanitary sewer mains. So 18 miles of televising and almost 36 miles of sanitary sewer cleaning every year. That is also a spring-summer activity. Can't be done in the winter because it requires a significant amount of water, and then with that water comes freezing. We do hydrant flushing, water main flushing to keep the pipes clear of iron and manganese. Iron and manganese is a naturally occurring element that is in our water supply. We don't have the entire system treated with iron and manganese treatment. Only 4 treatment plants in the city. As you know, we've talked at great lengths about a 5th to get to a point where the vast majority of our water is treated for iron and manganese. But we know that we can't treat, that all of the water that's in the water mains isn't treated, so we have to sequester that iron and manganese. And what that means is it turns to flakes, and it goes to the inside of the pipes because of the pressure in our pipes. And so that's why the water main flushing is trying to get those, when water is flowing a certain direction, the flakes of iron and manganese stay on the outside of the inside of the pipe. But when we do water main flushing, we reverse the direction of flow so that we actually catch those particles and we throw them out into our water bodies. It's a completely safe practice, but we do that in the spring and fall. We offer water shutoffs, and that generally happens when a contractor is working on an internal plumbing issue and they can't turn the valve off and they need to shut the water off kind of ASAP. So those are definitely emergency situations in most cases. So we normally have to drop what we're doing to go and turn those water shutoffs. Water main breaks, water service repairs. As you can see here, we get about 25 to 35 water main breaks annually, about 50 to 60 water service leaks annually. People ask me a lot, how do you know that there's a water main break? The stratification of the soil is more dense as you go deeper and less dense as you go up towards the surface. And so that water actually finds the surface in the path of least resistance, which is generally straight up. Most of the time, water main breaks are very noticeable and they are easy to locate. That's not always the case. Sometimes there's soil conditions that make it follow the pipe, but in 90% of the cases, it comes straight to the surface. In water service leaks, same thing, but generally it is really easy to determine whether or not it's resident responsibility or a city responsibility. If the leak is on the homeowner side of the valve, when you turn the valve off, the leak will stop. That means it's their responsibility. If it keeps on going after you turn the water off, that means it's on the city side, and then it's our responsibility to repair. Most of those we do with our own staff members. There are times where we use contracted services for those repairs when they're in areas like France, under France, or those really, really busy areas, or there might be a lot of infrastructure in the way. One of the things that I'll mention in a few minutes is the fiber installs that are happening throughout the city. Fiber is really difficult to dig around because you can't, it needs to be supported at all times, otherwise it could potentially break. And we've had a considerable amount of fiber being installed, which is a good thing from a connectivity perspective, but for us in terms of we're just managing to get through even just the locating of our existing utilities for the fiber projects is becoming quite a challenge. Normally we have one guy that does about 50,000 separate locates per year. Those are normally sewer, water, and street, or sewer, water, and sanitary sewer. So when I say 50,000, that's really about 17,000 actual tickets that he gets. But he'll have to locate all three utilities. It becomes quite the challenge when our number of miles of utility locates went from about 25 miles to 105 miles. And so that's one of the reasons why we've asked for a position that was approved in the budget in 2025. We normally have one guy that does our utility locates. This last year we had 3 guys doing utility locates, which means there's other things that we can't get done because of that.
In about 5 minutes.
I can do it in 5 minutes. We're almost there. Sewer backup response. If anybody wants to come to a sewer backup and help us respond, we'd welcome you. It's probably one of the most volatile situations that we get in. And certainly there's a lot more than 10 to 15. The 10 to 15 that's mentioned here are generally only the ones that are our responsibility. Somebody cleaned out their sewer and left it in the sewer and blocked up sewage upstream of them, and we can't be out there every day. We have a the League of Minnesota Cities has a goal of making sure that you're there once every 5 years. If you're there less than 5 years, you're not liable for that happening. Although a lot of times we have relationships with contractors that allow us the ability to go out there because they say, hey, we just cleaned a line. We go out there and clean it even though it's not due within that time frame. I mentioned catch basin and manhole repairs. As I mentioned, also the full-time staffing complement is based upon our snow plowing ability. Since 2016, we've added 16 miles of city-maintained sidewalks. Sidewalk maintenance on private sidewalks is not included in this budget. Talked about seasonal labor already. The staffing analysis that was performed in 2021 that Perry mentioned, we did end up adding 3 full-time staff members, but it was because we had 3 full-time electricians and HVAC specialists that were taken out of, they voluntarily got out of the 49er union, so they didn't have the ability to do any snow plowing, and so we replaced those positions with the positions that were recommended in the staffing analysis. Again, those 3 positions were increased sweeping. We have one guy where we used to do full city sweep in the spring, full city sweep in the fall. Now we do full city sweep in the spring, full city sweep in the fall, and we have that guy sweeping all year long. And so we have about 30 extra miles of increased frequency of once a month. So we continue to add that as we see as time permits. As we've increased our response time with service requests to 1 day, sometimes even less than that, because we do City Works. City Works allows people to put in their pothole request. We'll just use potholes as an example. They'll put in their pothole request. The way it used to work is they would accumulate all of those service requests over the course of 2 or 3 days. The supervisor would then dole them out to their staff members, and then they would go out and do them the next day. So it could be 3 to 4 days before you had your pothole repaired, but now it's all electronic. Somebody can take a picture of a pothole, they send it. Our guys have tough pads in their trucks, so they can see it and sometimes do it within an hour. That's great, but the next time that resident is going to expect that kind of service, and we can't necessarily guarantee that, but we do say that we will at least respond within a 24-hour period.
And a response in that case might be an email acknowledgement.
It might be an email acknowledgement. It might be, you know, where we've gotten your request. We're going to put you in as a work order, and we'll get to it as soon as we can. I want to briefly talk about equipment, and I know that that's one of the topics for the March meeting, so I don't want to get too far in depth. But I thought it was really important for you to understand that during post-COVID, because we do most of the service requests or vehicle replacement requests, or at least provide assistance with Richard to other departments, there was an article that was written about post-service vehicle replacement cost, and between 2020 and 2023, and now I lost it, so it's okay, I can remember it. Total equipment replacement costs are jumping about 20% in a 3-year period. The cost for trucks alone have jumped from March 2020 to March 2023. They've raised 33% in just the 3 years post-COVID. Construction equipment is very similar. It's 24.9% increase over a 3-year period. So I understand the desire and the thought process behind trying to decrease our cost in vehicle replacement. But if we don't have these vehicles to do the job, we can't do the job. So that's I think where we're going to leave it. The one thing I put on here that we can talk about at a future date, but we, you know, there's been some conversations with certain council members, but PFAS, PFAS, the forever chemical, we know that that's coming up. It is one small portion of the total problem that's being defined at this point. There's 6 different chemicals that are protected or regulated now by the federal government, and we are in some lawsuits, class action lawsuits. We continue to monitor that. We know that there'll be some money coming our way at some point in the future but it's not yet, and we have 5 years to implement those things. The problem with our system is that it's a decentralized system, so it's very difficult because we don't have one centralized system, so we can't like automatically do water softening or filtration for PFAS at one place. It has to be at all of them. So that's it.
We're gonna do Chad's presentation, and then we're gonna take a quick 10-minute break. I know that's not on the schedule, but I decided that I think it was necessary to just do a quick one, but we wanna get through
4
one more.
hours without a break.
Yeah, I'm really, on paper, I'm very efficient.
Okay.
All right, Chad.
Engineering, take a stand break if you need, stand up. It's always nice when you get the big green scissors away from Perry once in a while for your projects.
They're sharp, they're sharp.
They are sharp. We're 9% of the budget, and we'll run through all the various divisions and services we have. So we have 27 people in our department, broken off in 5 different divisions. We have 11 in facilities, and it's very unique. We share services again between Parks and Public Works. So of the 11, we have 1 person at 50th and France. We have 1 that does park shelter maintenance, cleaning operations, custodial. We have 1 here at City Hall that does the PD side of custodial services. And then the project managers, like Derek Otten runs that group, and you know those individuals. Aaron Ditzler manages our street reconstruction, the design and construction division. You see him at meetings and know those services. Transportation side, Andrew Scipione is the manager, and we have Nick Baller does traffic safety requests. Ross Bittner, engineering services, that's GIS, water resources, and permitting. There's 4 individuals in that division, and then sustainability, Marissa Bayer and Matthew Gabb in our sustainability group. Services summary, we have the street reconstruction, local and municipal state aid, so there's just a difference in the funding there. It's not statutory required, it's really a quality of life. We want to be able to plow streets and not throw gravel in people's front yards. It's a combination of in-house, we do some work in-house and consultants. Just like number 2, the storm, sanitary, and water utility projects. When do we replace those pipes and rehab those pipes? And that's kind of a combination of various quality of life, health and safety, statutory. And again, we do that with a combination of in-house and consultants. The pedestrian and cyclist safety fund. So there are some services and staff members here that are not paid out of the general fund. This is a franchise fee item, just like the CAS with the sustainability services. But that's really quality of life, the pedestrian and bicycle facilities, sidewalks, but that's a high resident demand service. People want better, safer streets with more sidewalks, more bike lanes. Same thing with traffic safety requests. Every year we give you a summary. We come to council in the spring and give you a summary of how many requests we do. And again, that's a high resident demand service. Residential permitting, I'll lump these next 3 all together. When I talk about residential site permitting, commercial site permitting, and the right-of-way permitting. There's a whole combination of some statutory, some quality of life, some council direction. 10, 12 years ago when I started, there was a stormwater and residential redevelopment was happening, stormwater being pushed on neighbors, and there was quite a concern, and we tightened up those regulations in our local rules and regulations with that. The demand is way greater than staff capacity on those 2 combined. We have 1 person and some assistance from me and Ross on that. Andrew does a lot of those. So we do bring consultants in the summer when the big wave comes through for right-of-way permitting with the fiber projects Brian was mentioning, and also those when construction happens on commercial and residential sites. And then water resources, flooding and drainage, really Jessica's work. That's again a combination of that statutory quality of life and health and safety. You think of FEMA, you think of the watersheds we have in town and managing first floor elevations with Carrie's work and homes that go in, those kind of things. Clean water, lakes and ponds, that's a little bit statutory, a little bit quality of life. That's where people ask for services for their lakes and ponds. We manage that work, but then they pay for it. So it's not coming, the service isn't paid out of the general fund. We also have our own city permit. Our MS4 is a PCA permit that we're required to do certain things, which street sweeping accounts for some of that. There's a whole list of items that we have to do and manage that permit. And that leads right to the clean water and clean lakes. Natural resources management, the landscaping. This is another kind of crossover between engineering and parks with some of the park property. Quality of life, there's the landscaping practices on what we do at the parks. Around this building, we've made some changes. We're making more changes. I got the golf course where we have natural landscaping. Really stormwater and climate action plan related, those services. Private wells, we have a wellhead protection plan, so Jessica really helps with the private wells, documenting them, where they are, and we're trying to get them all sealed up so they don't allow contaminants into our drinking water supply. That's a statutory health and safety issue.
Roughly how many?
How many private wells? Geez, I don't even want to take a number, but I mean, a majority of people built before the 1950s had a private well. So how many properties were developed at that point? But we can get you a number if you want.
Doesn't have to be
See 'em
exact,
come
I was
up?
looking for like,
100?
Like in place operating, some have irrigation, I bet there's 100 operating today, but there's like more so when a home gets demoed, hey, there used to be a private well on your site, and they say, yeah, there's this little metal thing in the corner.
We don't know what it is.
We don't know what it is, so we get the PCA out, they review it, that's a private well. We don't let them develop till they seal that up properly, so there's not contaminants. So really, that review is triggered by residential property redevelopment, commercial property redevelopment. We look through all the old records and Jessica says, yep, there was one there and I don't have a record of a sealed well. It is somewhere. They'll take a house down and sometimes find that metal well pipe because it was in the basement or in a corner like that.
potentially hundreds in that realm.
Still in town? I think there's probably, hundreds, maybe more.
That sketch plan that you reviewed last Tuesday, they have it well on that side.
Yeah, there's one from them.
Okay, thank you.
We have a website and so does a PCA. You can see what's in your yard and go check it out.
It's in my backyard. It's really fun.
Yeah.
You look it up online.
Have you gotten it sealed?
No, I don't have one, but I go on the what's in my
look at the
backyard
map.
thing just to
Paint
see like
those
what's in
up.
my backyard. My backyard has nothing
The
interesting.
website's called What's in My Backyard at the PCA. Then you can see if there's tanks or wells. Clover Ride, that's a service the council, that's a strictly council-directed policy to provide 1 day a week service, bus service, mostly around the Southdale area. Then we got 2 commissions. So Andrew helps with the Transportation Commission. Quality of life, again, if there's commissions or not, that takes some staff time. They want faster implementation of bike and ped facilities. You hear that? They got reports on that. Energy and Environment Commission, Marissa helps with that group. And again, they want much faster implementation around the climate action plan. And then we have the climate action plan. That was many, many actions over 10 years. We're about halfway. You're gonna get a good update from her later this spring. But again, that's a high resident demand service, but it is a quality of life. It's not a requirement. And then the Climate Action Fund is a fund we dedicate some of the franchise fees to residents to do work, right? To make those initiatives, to do solar or improvements on their mechanical systems or e-bikes, or we had first year was a little slow. Last year we got through we have 100,000 dedicated to that kind of projects, and it all went out the door, which is good. People are doing work in town. And then a lot of sustainability and outreach, Matthew's position. When you think about green to go, carry out bags, building benchmarking, climate action fund, energy assessments, telling that story, telling people what we have for resources for them takes a lot of time at different farmers markets and different events, and also working with our communication staff on a lot of that stuff. Matthew's main role was grants and funding, $2 million plus already in less than about a year and a half. For sustainability and infrastructure related around the infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act. So really great work there, bringing in money, leveraging our current funds. There's usually a match, but we can do that with the CAS fund. Now we get more into that facility management with that team of 11. Derek's team, it's really decentralized. We help all the other enterprises. If they got an issue, we come out and try to troubleshoot some stuff. We do have, like Brian mentioned, we have 4 electricians and HVACs in a union, and they help again with various facilities. Some we manage entirely, like City Hall, Public Works, and the fire stations. The enterprises, we're a resource for them. We did that staffing study that was already mentioned a couple times, and just by the square footage of our buildings, it said we should have 3 more additional staff in facilities to help manage it. And really is the plumbing and the carpentry and stuff like that. Brian DeReamer is at 50th and France. He does snow and ice removal and garbage and landscaping and paver maintenance, and works with Brian's crews when they do the parking ramp, snow removal. Public Works also helps with some of the big planters and stuff like that, where we need bigger pieces of equipment to help move around there. So again, it's that sharing of work. I mentioned the park shelter custodial. We have Nate Johnson, and then we try to get seasonals to help clean the shelters. And after different events there, it can not only cake, there's a lot of other stuff after some of those events that Nate,
No glitter.
glitter, whatever, and damage. A lot of park shelters are damaged. Nate notifies proper people, and then we look for staff in both these departments too. Parks and Public Works help repair some of those things. I mentioned Yared is here on City Hall, the police side for custodial services. Mentioned the union, and then right-of-way vacations is just another statutory thing that you see me do once in a while. Every few council meetings, we seem to have one of those. That's a service we have to do. And then cost drivers and other important information. I think Zoe's working on a FT count over the years, potentially at some point, but there was an increase in 2020. Engineering went from 14 to 24, and that was just from a shift of staff. Facilities shifted out of Public Works in the engineering, and sustainability shifted from admin engineering. It wasn't that we added 10 new staff members. We did add new staff members, and that was 3 positions since that time. 2 for facility project managers, and then the sustainability specialist. Again, that staffing study says we're a little short on the facility side. ETC, EEC want faster adoption, right? That's on both the bike and ped master plan, and then also the climate action plan. Funding challenges, we've talked about these quite a few. State aid funding doesn't keep up with our state aid streets. So that's a concern for me moving forward. Street lighting, we've made some progress with the franchise fees in 23. We're gonna be back with a discussion here real soon around franchise fees again in 25. But street lighting, we have like, the Grandview district's been basically dark for many years, and we're starting to do little pieces of it, but street lighting is expensive. Brian brought up the permitting and right-of-way locates. It's greater demand than staff capacity. So our electricians do some of the locates on the fiber and electrical and stuff like that, but we can't keep up. We actually have to hire a locating firm to help us with those locates, because we feel their skills are better used to help troubleshoot in buildings and our own infrastructure than doing locates out in the field. So we hire a firm that helps with that stuff. And again, there's some initiatives that are approved that get very little either enforcement or staff time. Green to Go, the bag fee, it's just approved and really not monitored. I know is that the right way to do a policy or not? It's just a question to throw out there. You've heard a lot about aging infrastructure, climate change. For me, climate change is wetter seasons, bigger storm events. How's the storm system going to handle that? The flooding, protecting properties. You'll see homes raised up. That's part of the thing to address climate change. And then consultants, we do hire a few, and they most likely cost more than in-house staff. So I think we're doing a great job of the things we do in-house. We got a great value with our in-house staff. And we have some of the same staffing challenges that these guys have mentioned. So. Well, I got you back on schedule.
And now she's gonna put a break in there.
I am. Let's break until 7, and then we'll dive back in.
All right, community development. We are made up of a planning division and assessing division. Most of the planning division you're familiar with, the vast majority of them appear before the city council. And we're divided 7 in each division. The planning department, we've got 3 planners, myself, and then the affordable housing manager and economic development manager. On the assessing side, there's the city assessor. We have 3 residential appraisers and 2 commercial appraisers. So first, talk about the planning services, and a lot of these are really both statutory and quality of life. We respond to developer and residential requests for information. That's kind of a constant. Phone calls and people stopping in, asking about setback regulations. Anytime a house this is mostly on the commercial end, But when there's a commercial closing, we do what they call a land use letter that provides the seller and the buyer kind of a history of what happens on the site. We review all building permit applications that come through, both residential and commercial, so that takes up quite a bit of time for the planners. Probably get anywhere from 5 to 10 per day. So again, we're just reviewing those for code compliance for setbacks, buildable area, those types of things. And then, of course, when someone doesn't comply with our ordinance regulations, then they can make an application for a variance, and those are the ones that the Planning Commission mostly sees, the residential variances. You do get a few appeals. We also review all sign permits, so anytime a business is changing out its sign, they need a new permit, and we review that for code compliance. We also provide land use reviews, so this is our liaison work with the Planning Commission. Site plan reviews, variances, conditional use permits, the rezonings, everything, most of those end up with City Council. So we send out notices to all property owners, depending on the type of application, between 500 and 1,000 feet. We get the projects posted on Better Together. Most of our time, the planner side of it, that is spent on all of that work. So the Planning Division, we support the staff liaisons to the Planning Commission, the Heritage Preservation Commission, HRA, and the Edina Housing Foundation. Another big part of our work is long-range planning. So as you know, comprehensive plans are updated every 10 years. Small area plans are tied into that. So as we're gearing up for another one in a couple of years here. On the affordable housing side, again, we provide the liaison to the Edina Housing Foundation, do home rehab programs, housing preservation program, the 4D NOAA preservation, community internet for those that are income qualified for free internet, and the Come Home to Edina second mortgage program. As you saw probably recently, they're out of money, out of funds in that. It's been, in the last 2 years, we probably had 25 to 30 loans, which is, we've never seen numbers like that. So we're gonna need to pause. We just don't have the money to, so it's a recycling fund. They pay those loans back. So and it goes back to Centennial Lakes back in the 80s. So it's the recycling fund, which means it's a successful program, but kind of reached its temporary end. On the economic development side, so this is the Bill Neuendorf position. He's the liaison to the 50th and France Association. He's the city's connection to Edina businesses and developers. Development finance with all of the tax increment financing proposals, spark funds, abatement, those types of things. He also oversees the public parking facilities, the permit process at 50th and France. And assessing. So the assessing department assesses every parcel of land, both commercial and residential. Again, 3 residential appraisers, 2 commercial. We have a high number of tax court petitions. That's a commercial property that is disputing its assessed value. We're going through that right now with the Macy's store at Southdale. They're disputing their assessment. It's pretty routine for Macy's to dispute that. It seems like every couple of years.
All over the country.
Yeah, yep. So that's where the commercial appraiser and the city assessor deals with that.
Does Target do it?
I don't recall them saying Target in the past.
But malls do, Simon does.
Yeah.
It's pretty common.
Pentagon Park,
People that own strip malls.
yeah.
Are they doing the Macy's furniture site too, or?
They have in the past, but right now it's the Southdale site.
Interesting.
They are the Board of Equalization, Appeal and Equalization. That's where residents can dispute their assessment, and then make their case before that board, and the residential appraisers help with that. That's a once a year function. So the big cost drivers for us is just the staffing to provide all of those services. Consulting fees for comprehensive plans and small area plans, kind of a specialty item that comes before the council every so often. We do have consultant fees for, to assist staff with historic reviews in the country club district. That's usually in the $15,000 a year range, so it's not a huge number. Credit card fees in assessing division, when people pay their assessments with a credit card, that's a big issue for them. That's a big cost driver. And we believe that the zoning code update will provide some efficiencies if we get it right in the end in our development review process. That's it for community development.
As you'll notice, these presentations are going to get smaller and smaller because the portion of the organization is getting smaller and smaller. So I have the first department that is both operating department. There's some external services that we provide, but we're also a supporting department, which means we provide internal. We are also your department. So, and that, a lot of, I'll say this again at the end, but one of the things that's most important when you think about the admin department is not only are we a department with some services that we provide specifically to the organization as a supporting, but we also oversee the whole organization. So it's kind of it's a little bit hard to explain in that way, but it's both. So I'm going to skip and just kind of dive right in here. So we do data practices and records retention. So we are the first stop with those data requests that come in, and we're also responsible for training our staff and making sure that we're compliant for records retention purposes. So some quick stats. We had 436 data requests in 2024. That is up 97% since 2021. So when you think about, not only is that impacting our department, but depending on how long of a period of time that data request comes in, that's impacting other departments. So getting it together. Our job is to be able to, one, ask the departments to pull it together, but two, make sure we're not giving out any information that we're not supposed to be giving out that might be private or sensitive. Another thing that we do is liquor licensing. We have 60 licenses in that area. We do charge for this service, and that there's multiple departments involved when it comes to the enforcement and aspects of the liquor licensing.
I have a general question about any of these that
Yes.
we charge a fee. Do those fees cover the cost of doing that, or is the fee set almost by the statute and there's no flexibility in what the fee rate is?
I'm going to say it depends, because there are some where there's limitations on how much we can charge. So for instance, like we can charge for data practices, but it's really limited on what we could charge. But there are some areas where we do try to cover our fees. And that's one of the things that we need to look at through our budgeting process, is making sure that we are trying to be as consistent as possible to cover all of our costs going into those fees.
But there are statutory limits around how much we can charge, right?
Yeah.
We can't charge to a profit-making level. There has to be a nexus between the cost of providing that service and the permit itself.
Yep.
Sorry, I was deep in concentration on something for about 3 hours, and I just missed it.
Well, welcome. We're happy to see you. So next thing is massage licensing. We do the licensing portion of this, but the fire department and the health department actually does the inspection portion of this. We have 23 of them. It's a quality of life aspect and it's really kind of a safety health regulation is why we're licensing those features. It's not something that if you ask me to stop doing massage licensing, it's really going to impact our overall stuff, but it is something that we spend our time on, and I think that's important to note. We have all sorts of permits that we provide. There's some data here about how many we're providing for these various things. We also do elections. So one thing that's going to be kind of a change for you guys is that due to the school district changing, we're going to be moving to the odd years. We won't have elections, hopefully, unless there's some sort of special referendum or special election that happens. So in those odd years, or in the even years, that's a significant impact on the organization, not just for the admin department, but for all of our departments we require, and we ask for a lot of help and support from facilities, public works, everyone in the city to help us to make sure that process is as efficient as possible. City code management, so this is making sure our ordinances are updating, making sure that what we have in Muni Code, helping you guys if there's anything that comes down from the legislature that requires us to make any changes or modifications, guiding staff through what that process looks like if they have questions about how to get a city code update. Special events, again, another piece that really touches everywhere in the organization. We had 15 special events in 2024. Multiple departments involved, especially from a safety perspective. The process of doing those special events has changed significantly. We just need to be a lot more mindful, and they take a lot more time for us to be able to review and make sure we truly understand what's going to be involved in that and scope it out. So we also do city council. That's you guys. We support you, and we do meeting management on all of the aspects that are involved in that. We do strategic planning and financial management. That's this budgeting process and thinking about your visionary documents that we're helping you out on. We do organizational development and performance management type work. Something that performance measures is an area someday in the future we'd love to have more capacity to be able to dive into deeper, but we do try to monitor and do the best that we can with what we have. Board and commission management. So this, some of it from a statute perspective depends on the board and commission that we have, whether or not that's a quality of life or a statute requirement. This includes the recruitment, the administration of training that goes into boards and management, and the recognition program that we involved in board and commission management. Community engagement and a diversity, equity, and inclusion. Both of those are different programs that we offer, but I don't think of it as like we're the only people in the organization doing that work. That work is really something that the fire department is working on community engagement every day. The police department with their cadet program is thinking about how do we get more police officers. Things that we're doing that are really a performance-based. How do we make sure that we're providing the best quality of services for all of our residents and all of our staff? Human Rights and Relations Commission currently is a Human Rights and Equity Task Force, so they're evaluating. We do the staff liaison work for that. One area is the Human Services Task Force. I do think this is something that we probably are going to talk about more. There's money that's associated to that, goes to 10 providers right now. The Historical Society, this is where their money currently comes from, and so that's something for a future conversation piece for you guys probably. We have special projects. A lot of times when something either comes from the state or something you guys want to do, like cannabis is an example of something that popped up where it either starts here maybe, and then we figure out, okay, where does that need to go in the rest of the organization? Or maybe it's something that, ooh, this is a problem. We need to help out with that thing and try to give that staff more capacity to be able to dive deeper. We have legislative work that we do. We work on putting together the legislative agendas and then all sorts of work on that side. Legal, the legal budget is housed within the admin budget. There's also a contingency budget. It's a $200 million organization. There's times where things come up, especially if we're setting a budget 2 years in advance, that we just need to make sure that we're able to react to those. The Cable Commission. So this is something that some of you are involved in these next items that are on the thing. These are boards and different groups and external kind of regional groups that we're part of. So we oversee the cable management, and then we have all sorts of partnerships that we're working on with the school district, airports, railroad, any other regional Met Council, that type of work, partnership liaisoning if there's something that pops up. South Metro Public Safety Facility. So this one is also a little bit because we're not only doing the meetings, we're the fiscal agent, but we are the managing partner of that. So we are actually providing that. The staff is under our umbrella, and we provide those services actually on behalf of other jurisdictions.
But they're paid out of a separate fund.
Yes. Edina Chamber of Commerce, so that, and a lot of these things that are listed here, the reason they're listed is a lot of this stuff we do pay for. We pay a membership fee annually to be part of these organizations. So when you think about our participation levels and what we get, a lot of these groups do a lot of intergovernmental relations work for us, and then our contract with Katie Sutton is in here as well. In summary, these are the things that are kind of my takeaways for you. We're both a department that oversees day-to-day operations and strategic planning. We're a department and we oversee the day-to-day operations and strategic planning and oversight for the entire organization, which is 11 departments. It includes council, legal, and citywide budget items. So there's all sorts of stuff like Invisio, which is our progress portal, things like that go through that platform. Elections moving to every other year. That really does impact what we can accomplish on even years a lot of the time. And that's just kind of a reality of thinking about our work and our work plans on kind of an even odd year basis is something to, it will be more and more, especially now that we don't have to have odd year elections. And we're sort of the miscellaneous catch-all. So when something comes up or you ask us to try to figure something out, oftentimes that means that we're the people that will try to figure out whatever that new thing is. It doesn't mean it's going to live with us forever. So for instance, sustainability is an example. That's something that lived in the administration department, but now has found, I think, a better home for it over there with engineering. So that's all I have. I'm going to pass it on to IT.
All right, well, we don't have a lot of time, but fortunately for all of us here, a lot of what IT does, you've already heard some pieces of. IT is responsible for the systems that run many of the projects, initiatives, and other systems that you've heard about already. So we have a team of 9. That nicely breaks into 3 divisions. GIS, we provide strategic GIS direction for the city. We're not the only GIS area in the city. We also have GIS in engineering, but we provide the strategic and direction on that work. Second group I'll talk about is our support group, which is typically those staff that are at the desk, setting up systems, responding to most day-to-day problems. And the third group would be the systems group, servers, networks, and that sort of work. And we'll start there. Servers, systems, and storage, really. This area of service revolves around keeping those systems up and running for those various applications running in all the different departments. Integrate.
Data with one data center?
2, actually, yeah. And then we also work closely with Logis, so as a backup location as well. End user support. As everyone knows, there's increasing pressure on on the end user area of mobiles. Mobile technology is everywhere, and we're working as fast as we can to make sure that those staff in the field have access to the technology they need and access to the data they need when they need it. Network infrastructure, we have 52 sites with some sort of networking. UPS backup batteries where needed. We have roughly 20 miles of fiber. A lot of what we heard about earlier with fiber is not necessarily city-owned fiber. It's those companies coming in to lay fiber in the area.
What's the scope of the city-owned fiber
then? Most buildings that have staff have fiber to them. In addition, we're growing to more and more utility sites to make sure that we have secure and fast connections to those water utility locations.
Okay, so it's really the fiber, more or less, to connect the 52 sites that are like, oh, thank you.
GIS, I mentioned that. Strategy, admin, regular maintenance. That group is responsible for the census and redistricting work. Security is obviously an enormous area of focus for us. Not just cybersecurity, but physical security with card access. We're responsible for card access. We're responsible for cameras all over the city. Telecom, desk phones, obviously, cell phones, analog phones running certain pieces of equipment, 911 lines coming into the building, and again, fiber. Public safety vehicles, we are responsible for an increasing amount of technology in ambulances, fire trucks, and squad cars, other public works vehicles as well are starting to add some more technology. License plate readers, are going into more squads. Key secure and med vaults, basically just pieces of lock boxes for narcotics or Knox keys to open up buildings around the city. Enterprise applications, this is an area that's growing for us. Tyler Public Safety is just a fantastic piece of software that's running dispatch, records, mobile for both police and fire. CityWorks handles our public works and engineering assets. EdinaMN.gov is public health licensing. And Tyler Munis is our citywide ERP system. Software support. This is one area you will likely hear more about. We have roughly more than 175 applications around in different city departments. IT doesn't pay for many of those. IT typically will pay for those systems those pieces of software that are used by everyone. Departments that have department-specific software often will pay for that themselves. Regulatory and audits, we handle a lot of that work. Payment card industry, we have to do monthly, quarterly, and yearly compliance reporting. We have yearly audits with the BCA, yearly audits for finance, and yearly audits for license plate reading as well. External map applications, you've likely seen Development Tracker and Park Finder. Point of sale system, this is a huge amount of work for the IT staff around the city. We have roughly 42 terminals, 14 sites, and 5 different point of sale systems, and that doesn't include the online payment systems that we also handle some more PCI work for. But really, it's those different systems. A lot of organizations will have one, but we have so many different and varied lines of business. We have multiple systems that we have to keep up to date on. I mentioned security cameras and card access, roughly 341 cameras around the city and 266 doors secured at 40 different sites. Microsoft 365 is key to our business, as many businesses nowadays. Can do incredible things, but it takes some incredible skill to make sure you do it safely, securely for your organization. And we have a couple of members of our staff that are very skilled at it and are doing a great job keeping that moving forward. Enterprise GIS tools. Obviously, we use Esri, ArcGIS, and that a lot of dashboards are created and field data collection is taking place with those tools. Interagency connections. Other departments have talked about some of the connections they have with others. Agencies, Hennepin County for some of the things happening in police. Eden Prairie, we're connecting to them for some CAD to CAD, keeping police up to date at what's happening at each other's agencies. And Richfield, obviously, we handle dispatching for Richfield and other police applications. Some of those connections, intergovernmental, can be complicated and take a lot of finesse, both with our internal staff, their internal staff, and LOGIS, as I mentioned earlier. Election support. We have staff that are running around the city helping with the iPads on election day typically, as well as computer setup, printer setup, day-to-day operations of some of the elections equipment here at City Hall. Our group is on call 24/7 because of the public safety services we offer, as well as those weekend enterprise facilities that are open. We handle e-discovery and document management. The e-discovery both for legal hold and FOIA requests or records requests. Staff training. We are responsible for, we have some systems that help staff get trained. We work with HR on the new LMS system, as well as we require staff to get cybersecurity training every year. We provide support to auxiliary organizations, specifically South Metro, Public Safety Training Facility, Historical Society, and Minnesota Task Force 1. Most of those organizations don't require much of us, but when they do, we're there to help them out. Utility support, SCADA systems, networking, alerting, billing tools, a lot of different aspects of the utility billing process IT is involved in. AV support. We have roughly 20 rooms that we consider, AV equipped. Many more rooms with a single piece of equipment that we're responsible for, but wouldn't necessarily rise to the level of an AV equipped room. Display boards, HVAC and building automation support. We help with a lot of that monitoring around the city, get those systems online and get our staff able to connect to them, both from in the office and when they're remote for those emergency after hours calls. And obviously just general innovation. I think most of our departments involve us early when they're looking at new systems, look to us to help them come up with the most efficient way to help them get their tasks done. In IT, there's so many different ways to do things. Some things are incredibly expensive. We try to find the most efficient way to get from point A to point B, while keeping our. Sometimes that's enhancing our existing tools or using existing tools and tweaking them to make them work, and sometimes it is with a new tool. Cost drivers.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Actually, for the entire administrative area, this is the first time I've seen required in the statutory or quality of life column. So we had it on the services you provided, Ari, and then on these. So what's the context around that? How do I?
Mostly just required. There's really no way to run the operation if we don't have some of these basic primary systems. Is kind of the way I looked at it.
Okay, so we can't run a city without network infrastructure, you're saying. But it's not, in your case, it's not a statement about how that service gets provided, but that you need that service. Okay.
Storage management's a perfect example, right? SANs are getting surprisingly more expensive, not less expensive. So cloud begins to look more and more attractive.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Cost drivers, new projects and initiatives often have a technology component and IT resource needs. And it seems every year there's more and more likely to, new projects are likely to have some impact on IT. Integrations are becoming necessary. We try to consolidate on single systems whenever possible. It's not always possible, and then those integrations have to be created and maintained. Mobile devices and AI technology are changing the landscape quickly for us. Security, again, also changing fast. The increasing cost of the subscription model. It used to be that we could pay Microsoft $50,000 for our primary software, and then we'd be good for 5-10 years. That's not the case anymore. Now it's 4 times as much every year, or maybe not 4 times, but it's $150,000 every year instead of what the old model. Obviously, that comes with a lot of new features and a lot of new services, but that subscription model changes things for us. Those capital expenses are escalating seemingly every few years. Extensive list of software and services. Again, we have a group that has to be pretty nimble when it comes to software. Has to be pretty good at picking up new software, helping our staff move with it or work with it better. Keeping technology specialists, both from a salary and talent standpoint, seems difficult. We are pretty confident if we lost staff as of today, it'd be tough to replace that person with a similar salary. Just like everyone else, we're busy. It's tough to find that time to get those staff trained on on what's next, really. That's all I've got. Any questions?
I've got a couple for you. So when you think about all the responsibilities that you have and what's coming in our world as we seem to get more technologically proficient all the time, what do you foresee for a personnel need over the next 5 years?
I could potentially see,
Potentially,
I would say two, but
Bill?
probably one might be required, but two would help.
What kind of increased cost do you foresee from a system cybersecurity standpoint? We try to insulate ourselves from potential exposure and attacks.
In our security budget right now, I don't foresee a big increase in that, where I would see more of an increase on the system side of what you mentioned. Just that automation, getting systems to talk, some of the more advanced features of Microsoft 365 that would potentially help leverage some of those AI and more workflow processes that simplify existing tasks, I think. And that could be, another couple $100,000 per year.
Have you seen it? Yeah, you just raised an interesting point. Have you seen anything so far that you've observed would help make us more efficient through the use of AI?
Yeah, the answer is yes. Most of what we're looking at today, obviously, is the things to make staff more efficient at those administrative tasks. Help me write this email, help me brainstorm ideas for this upcoming event, help me, some of those things, some of those categories, I think are the low-hanging fruit of AI. It's that next step and taking that next step and using agents to automate real processes and take real work away from, the more mundane tasks, completely automating it is that next step that we're not there yet, but looks to be coming quickly.
Kelly? All right, Kelly Curtin, HR Director. I don't get in front of you very often, so thank you for letting me to share a little bit about HR. So we are a department of 6 full-time employees. We also have 2 part-time employees that work in the department. Jump right in here. So a lot of what we do is really determined by state and federal law and regulation. So I just have required here. It's really legality. Just thought I'd share that with you first. Along with like legal frameworks that govern employee relationships. So many of our services we have to do. So there's not a lot of negotiation and compliance. Comp and benefit strategies. So we've spent a significant amount of time researching and making sure that we remain competitive within the marketplace. Definitely been an increase there. Payroll and reporting. So just to give you a little context, we issued 1,155 W-2s for 2024. So while we have the 360 some full-time employees, we employ a lot more people, whether it's seasonal, part-time, election, and such. Labor relations, so we collective bargaining, grievance, and dispute resolutions. We currently have 6 collective bargaining agreements, so we negotiate fire and dispatch on even years, and then we have 4 contracts on odd years, so this is a big year for negotiating. And roughly 46% of our employees are in a union. So Minnesota is considered very labor-friendly, if you didn't know that. Benefits and leave of absences, so aside from just the strategy part of that, there's a heavy administrative role, just making sure we're complying with leaves of absences and things like that. Risk management, so risk and safety manager, Amy Murray, if you haven't met her, I hope you do, she's a fireball. She's done a phenomenal job bringing job safety awareness to different departments and employees. She's been here a couple of years, she's really done great. Key functions of risk management include safety, workers' comp, and OSHA compliance. Recruitment and selection, so making sure we're non-discriminatory in our hiring practices, partnering with DEI manager Thomas Burks, making sure that we're compliant around discrimination. And then, just explore that. And then in addition to what we're sort of required to do, some of the services are just best practices. They enhance organizational effectiveness, they increase employee engagement and retention. So, employee relations and performance management, making sure that we can
We check in with our employees, we recognize them for years of service or for doing a job well done. And then employee recognition, I just kind of touched on that, but appreciation is also important to us. We want to make sure that they feel appreciated. That helps with the retention. And then we also are responsible for the wellness program. So HR facilitates and our wellness committee in place and focuses on 5 dimensions of well-being, career, so training and development, emotional, community, social, financial, and physical. Talk a little bit about our challenges. So you've heard a lot of it. It's a tight labor market. In addition to that, it is tough to get seasonal workers, especially when you have Target paying $18 an hour. Why would they, as Brian mentioned, why would they want to work in streets when they can go work at Taco Bell? Turnover, so historically, our turnover has been pretty good. We have good retention. To some degree, turnover is good, especially if it's, because of retirements and a lot. We have a lot of long tenured employees. I'm not concerned about turnover, but we do want to be prepared for succession planning as the years go on. Some of the cost drivers, and I know we've talked about this in the past a little bit, but health insurance. So how do we keep it affordable for recruitment and retention purposes? We've had 10% increases in our health insurance renewals for the past couple of years, very impactful in our benefits budget. We recognize the importance to educate employees and to be responsible healthcare consumers, but how can we be more proactive in that? I do feel some of this is out of our control, right? So the cost of labor and hospitals and doctors and whatnot, but we do have a role in that and we plan to do our best we can there. Property insurance, so both residential and commercial property insurance is increasing. Our property insurance, I believe, went up 10%. You heard a lot of this through the LA fires. It's just through climate, weather situations. Labor attorney costs. I think I have our labor attorney on speed dial the past couple of years. We've navigated a lot of new territory with regulations from COVID, from new laws that are upcoming. So it's definitely been an increase in labor attorneys. And then the need and cost for HR-related technology is increasing. Part of what Ryan was saying, we need to think about, the work that we do and how can we do it more efficiently. Oftentimes that's with technology. We have a couple of new Minnesota leave laws. So Minnesota earns sick and safe time. That is a new law that went into effect last year, so January 1st of 2023, where we are required to give 1 hour of paid time for every 30 hours worked, and this includes seasonals and part-times. So that was a big shift in how we provide those benefits, and I'll talk about it in a second. In addition, there is a new Minnesota paid leave starting January 1st of 2026, where employers will pay a 0.44% payroll tax to fund this program. And this excludes the cost of the administration side of it. What this leave provides is partial wage replacement if an employee is unable to work for 7 days or more. It offers them 12 weeks of parental leave, 12 weeks medical leave. You can combine the two so you can have up to 20 weeks off. Now, it applies to all employees essentially, so that's impactful as you think about seasonal employee working at the aquatic center for 2 weeks, and now they need 6 weeks off. So that'll be something we are starting to plan for. Competitive wages, I'll talk about that. So I've showed this slide to you in the past, but the city comp strategy is really to ensure that we can attract and retain high-performing employees. We want to make sure we have flexible job design, internal equity, external competitiveness, and fiscal responsibility. I'm going to go a little bit off topic, but it applies to future slides. So I want to differentiate between equal pay and pay equity. So equal pay is really focuses on the same job. So if you have a male accountant and a female accountant, you need to pay them similarly. They can't pay the female one lower. And that's a federal law. Pay equity is paying fairly for work of equal or comparable value. So it's a little bit different. They may have different jobs, similar value, fair pay. There is a Minnesota law that The Minnesota Pay Equity Act, it's created to ensure public employers, both state and local government, provide equal pay for equal work regardless of gender. Some of the provisions of that is that we are required to conduct a pay equity report every 3 years and submit it to the state. We actually just wrapped ours up, so you'll be seeing that on the council in the next couple of weeks, or a city too. And then it also requires us to have a comparable work plan, which focuses on ensuring equal pay for jobs with comparable value. One component of a comparable work plan, a component of a comparable work plan is a job classification system. So all jobs in the city are given points based on various factors such as qualifications, decision-making, problem-solving, etc. You can think about engineering. The requirements for that job may look different than our receptionist. So all jobs are evaluated. We did implement a classification system in 2012. And then other considerations, market changes. So we have really seen an increase in our benchmark cities, which are listed on the right there, doing or completing comp studies. So we've seen a ton of movement with compensation, where we're starting to fall behind a little bit in our compensation. Union negotiations, you heard Brian talk about like the electricians, or the mechanics, sorry. The mechanics were actually in the union. They were being paid the same as the streets workers. And it's really hard to recruit for, so that's why they stayed vacant for a while. They weren't paid comparably to, you know, mechanics in the private sector and whatnot. So through negotiations, we were able to increase that, show the need for that in order to recruit. But union negotiations does play a role with that. We've seen a lot of movement in pay for police officers and firefighters, significant changes. So if we don't respond when the market changes, we won't be able to recruit quality candidates. So it's very important. Our comp strategy, so we should be reviewing, or we do generally review our comp plan every 3 to 4 years, really benchmarking against our other cities. But we should be doing a full class and comp study every 10 years. I will say, since we haven't done since 2012, we are a little bit behind, but you will see that for sure on the next budget work plan. And yeah, it's important we retain our good employees, we value them, and we don't want them to leave. So, and it's tough staffing out there. That's all I have.
Hold on just a second, let me ask a question. Can you go back to that slide where it was Family Medical Leave Act slide? Yeah, I wanted to ask you about with the Minnesota Paid Leave Act that goes into effect on January 1st next year. How does that interface with the, I take it that we've had some kind of a paid leave situation here in our structure.
We do. So we.
So how is that going to interface with what we have to do with the state?
Yes, so we haven't determined all the decisions yet. We did increase our paid parental leave from 2 weeks to 6 weeks. There are some options if you pay, so if you pay a full 12 weeks paid parental leave, you may not have to pay the 0.44%. If you offer the benefit of what the law is going to require, you can maybe get away from that 0.44%, but we're just starting to have those conversations of what to do. At a minimum, I assume we'll do the 0.44%. It's actually 0.44% for the employer, 0.44 for the employee.
It also, though, on the other side, means that people might take the 12 weeks if they weren't taking the 12 weeks previously. Most of the time when somebody goes out on parenting leave, they're going to take as much time as they possibly can, for good reason.
Right.
But that is something that organizationally will also have impact outside of just the cost dollar. It'll be an operational impact.
Right.
So that analysis is just starting. Yeah.
It's just starting. It goes into
Rules
effect
have
21.
been slow coming from
It has
the
been very
state.
slow. We anticipate some change, obviously, possibly with the election or whatnot, but yeah, it'll be interesting to roll that out for sure. We haven't talked a lot about it, but we need to start planning for it for sure.
Does that 0.44% affect both the public and private sector employers? Same rate?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
it was 0.3, they were guessing it was, or 0.38 or something, they were thinking it was gonna be that, now they're like, no, we need more money. Sort of operates like unemployment, where you get a portion of your wage, so you get like 2/3 of your wage or whatnot when you go out. We could consider covering the rest of it, but again, we haven't had those discussions. And there's a big operational.
But that's a good point, Kelly, that what we're showing you is 0.44 today. That it's possible that could raise during the year as the state gets more and more precise about what they're gonna need. So we'll make sure we tell you how that changed if it changes.
Yeah, I really just wanted to introduce it because I think there'll be plenty of conversation going forward. But it'll be a big impact to operations too, so.
All right, finance. Our finance department is made up of 10 FTEs total. Of the 10 FTEs, there are 2 of the 10 that are funded by our utilities fund. As some stats up there, finance is about 3% reliant on the general fund levy and makes up about 3% of the general fund expense. But if we were to take a look at all the adopted budget funds, so this is your governmental, your enterprise, and your internal service funds, we make up about 0.89% of the entire, this is that 220 million budget number. Next, please. Ari, if you could flip through the slides for me, that'll be great. So then I don't forget. I'll start here. Finance, we are a support department, like Ari mentioned earlier. So what this means is a lot of the stuff that we do, they are sanctioned either by Minnesota state statute or either by quality of life, depending on the service that we're providing our finance service for. So I'll start us off with the annual comprehensive financial report, or the ACFR. The ACFR is the acronym for the financial report that we publish annually, and this comes out after our annual audit. With the annual audit, it starts in December, runs until June. It's one of our biggest lifts in the year, besides the city's budget and CIP process. The ACFR, a little note on that, is to receive, we're required by state statute to have an audit and to provide financial reports to our stakeholders. And then to get the GFOA award, it's not required, but getting the award means we meet high standards of the program, which includes demonstrating a constructive spirit of full disclosure of our financials, to clearly communicating our financial story, to motivate potential users and user groups to read our report. The Certificate of Achievement is the highest form of recognition a government entity can receive for its governmental accounting and financial reporting, and it just represents accomplishment of its government and its governing board. So that's a little bit on what the ACFR award is. In terms of the, I call it the easier to read version of the ACFR, is the popular annual financial report. We also publish this through our edition Edina that we partner with communications department to put out. This is also dependent on the annual audit, and we bring that in-house. Other entities, they do it outside, but for us, we do it in-house. And again, we go out for the PAFRA award with the National GFOA, or Government Finance Association. With us getting this award, we have to first apply for the ACFR award, and with us receiving the PAFRA award, it means that this report has been reviewed by judges made up of other city government officials like finance directors or whatnot, who evaluates this report based off of reader appeal, understandability, distribution methods. So for Edina, we have it on the web as well as printed versions, and then our creativity and other elements of reporting out. The other thing that we also do as a finance department is we are in charge of the biennial budget, or the budget for the city of Edina. This is a statutory requirement, but then also I put quality of life, because we not just only put together a budget, we also go out for the budget award through the National GFOA. To be able to receive this award, we have to satisfy nationally recognized guidelines to what is an effective budget presentation, right? So there's different guidelines we have to, that we are assessed against in our budget development, from what type of policy document it is, to the financial plan we present, to the operational value as well as how we communicate it. So when we receive this award, it means we're proficient in all these 4 categories, plus 14 other mandatory categories that we have to show to receive this award. So I am very proud to say our finance department has been Triple Crown winners with the National GFOA for applying for these awards and obtaining them for the last couple of years. When I say couple, I think it's been like over 10 years that we have received this award. So that is another thing that finance does. In addition to our biennial budget, we also are in charge of our capital improvement plan. We work alongside all the different departments in putting this capital improvement plan. You're well aware of it. We just finished our last one for 25 through 30. It is a 6-year plan and it is required by state statute. In addition, we have utility billing, like I mentioned. The city of Edina, we have 3 different cycles. That means we bill monthly for each monthly and alternating between the 3 cycles. What this means is there is involvement in how we do move in and move outs. If users move in and out, we have to work on those work orders with Public Works. There's title company requests whenever a home sells. And then at the end of the year, we go through a certification process if there's any outstanding delinquent utility accounts. In addition, we also have, because we're a support service, fire runs the Edina ambulance service, fire runs it, but finance provides to us. Finance provides the financial supporting side of it. We do contract out to a third-party vendor to do our billing and collection of the revenues from this service. However, we are required to do the reporting within our financial system to match up the books. In addition, we also have a service through the Department of Revenue, which is the city has to be the one, as we are the entity or the owner of the service, to administer this revenue recapture program. This is, let's say, ambulance bills are outstanding for a period of time. We can go and intercept any revenues that the recipient receives from the state on behalf of the city to pay for these bills. And so with that, that's through the Minnesota Department of Revenue. In addition to that, we also have to complete an audit with the Department of Revenue every 3 to 5 years. Along with this ambulance service, finance also has to report a Medicare reporting. We report to the state once every year in March for this ambulance service that we provide. In addition, we are also, like mentioned earlier, the physical agent or the chair for the South Metro Public Training Facilities. So what this means is I'm the treasurer. The finance department is also responsible for the treasury operations. So this comes in from budget, the budget creation to AP and AR, all the same functionality that we do for the city, we also do for South Metro Public Training Facility. Now moving on to debt management. So this is our statutory requirement of the city. As we issue debt, we are obligated to pay these obligations or issuances back. What that also means is that there's an opportunity for investments as we ride out the high yielding interest rate markets. So what this means is we get the opportunity to put these investments into earning yields, but then also at the same time, what this means is it could create a positive arbitrage reporting. So that means that we have to pay back the feds with any positive arbitrage we earn on any of these issuance. So that's also another tracking that we have to do. We do, of course, hire out for the arbitrage reporting, but then in terms of the reporting out to the feds, the city is responsible for doing that. With debt management, that comes also spending down the different bond issuances that we have. There's milestone markers when we issue debt that we have to spend down by a specific time. And then, of course, we have to pay ourselves back when we issue any debt. So the city usually fronts the payments, and then we have to draw it down from the issuances that we issue, or the proceeds. All right, so before I talk about the East Edina Housing Foundation, similarly, our HRA, we also do, I just want to mention that HRA, we also do the treasury or the financial keeping for this entity as well. That goes from the financial reporting to the TIP reporting, finance, along with community development. We oversee this operations. Now for Edina, East Edina Housing, We are also the treasurer on this. We do financial monitoring, and there's also an annual audit that we have to complete towards the end of our city's audit that we need to file a 990 tax filing for. Now, apart from all this, we also do the Minnesota Task Force 1, as we are the host city, so we do treasury keeps for that, as well as paying their bills to receiving their checks, as well as reviewing their claims before they submit it to the state for reimbursement. Enterprise financials, so all the different enterprises that the city has, finance has a hand in every operation that goes in and out of the enterprises, from all the different POS systems to reconciling that to our main financial system, to doing analytical analysis on all the financials, to providing quarterly reports on different enterprises to upper management. The Southwest Cable Commission, we are also the chair on that, treasurer on that, so we have to do financial reporting for that as well. Accounts payable and accounts receivable, I kept it at the end because other than just cutting the check and paying the bills and depositing checks, there is more to what we do. There's purchasing cards, the city credit cards that we oversee the program. There's vendor invoices, like I mentioned, to employee expense claim reimbursements, to any requisitions for purchases. It all flows through finance before it comes in front of you. And then accounts receivable, we do the city's general billing for one of the programs that Perry mentioned earlier was our park maintenance fees. That's one of the programs that we bill out for and we track. And then, of course, there's the bank reconciliation duties that finance is required to do. Other stuff I want to call out is because we are a support department, aside from analytical reconciliation and POS interface between the systems in our financial system, we are required to also file any reportings to the state level, to the county level, or to the feds, depending on what the funds or the monies is for. So an example will be the ARPA dollars. Finance is required to gather the data and file that annually. Go to the next one. So in terms of cost drivers for finance, I would say staffing to be able to provide quality service. Retention, training, and development is key in our department. For the purpose of segregation of duties and the needs for checks and balances, that's why we have the number of staff we have to do the work that we do for the operation of the city. Operational costs, of course, there's a rising cost of technology, like Ryan mentioned earlier, with finance, utilizing the ERP system, being one of the main users, that is becoming it's an ERP system, so it's expensive. For future of that program, and Ryan can probably talk a little more about it, is with every system moving to the cloud, that's one of the programs we know that in the near future we have to consider that. I put down debt management as, of course, there's obligations for us to make debt payments for any issuances that the city makes. I put down utility billing infrastructure as one of our cost driver. We have a utility infrastructure that we got to keep maintenance on, and so hand in hand with that is, of course, the utility rate study, which we have in our work plan for 2025 to start on. And then I have capital improvement plan. I talked a little bit about that earlier, but one of the important thing or cost driver for that is, as you have noticed in the last CIP, there is a volume of aging and existing infrastructure needs that we need to consider as we build our budget and our CIP. And then, of course, with funding gaps, as we have this list of capital improvement projects and equipment replacement needs, we need to come together and put down a sound budget that will work for the future. And with all of that, community engagement through our reporting, quarterly financial reporting, to our annual audit, the different variation, whether that's the AFR, the PAFR, transparency, and our financial presentation.
Right, and last but certainly not least, we've got communications. Thanks. I think
most of you know, I had part of my neck reconstructed 2 weeks ago today, and it's been really uncomfortable for me to look, so I'm gonna stand if that's okay. So best for last. I'm proud to represent the communications department. We are a team of 7 full-time people, and I kind of describe our work as being in 5 buckets. Those buckets are media and public relations, digital communications, print publications, video production, and advertising and marketing for our general fund activities. So who are those 7 people? Besides me, you have our City Hall receptionist, Lynette Biuno. We have 2 full-time communications coordinators. One is Senior Communications Coordinator Lauren Siebenaller, and the other is Digital Communications Coordinator Brittany Bader. We have a full-time graphic designer who works on all of the pretty things that you see coming out of the city. And we have 2 full-time video production staff. One is Video Production Manager Scott Denfeld, and the other is Community Television Administrator Dan Carpenter. You've heard a lot tonight about the Southwest Suburban Cable Commission, for which we serve as fiscal agent and manager. That includes 1 part-time staff member. Dan gets a full-time check from the city of Edina, but half of his pay is for work that he does for the 5 member cities and Edina residents who have Comcast complaints. He's the guy that takes all those complaints when someone is unhappy with their service in Edina. Our budget in the general fund is just under 1%. So let's talk a little bit about those buckets of work. For media relations, that is what it sounds like. We're not the gatekeeper. We don't do every interview with the media, but we're issuing press releases. You see those every time we issue one. We're helping the media find the right person on city staff to talk to. We're helping staff prepare talking points or prep for interviews. Believe it or not everyone is comfortable talking with the media, so we help and coach where we can. And then we're proactively looking at risk communications issues and trying to cut those off. Some of our best crisis communications work is work the public never really hears about, right? For public relations, I want to first point out that our receptionist is a big part of the city's public relations. Not every city anymore still has a central telephone operator. They might have a telephone tree for each building. We still have central telephone operation where you can call a general line and she will help triage those calls and get to the right facility or department. Of course, we also have centralized reception here at City Hall. A big part of that is for security reasons. But Lynette is we say, the voice of the city and sort of that first face for most people when they're seeking services. Other public relations efforts are coordinating award and recognition programs. Those are things like both the mayor's commendations in the spring and Hometown Heroes. One of our strategies in communications is to tell the story of city government through the people who use our city services, not here's the who, just the basics on the organics recycling program. Let's find someone who's a real champion for organics recycling in the community. And that generally excites their friends and neighbors to be more interested in a program like that. We also help develop any communications plans, and we oversee all of the logos and trademarks for the city. Our next bucket of work is print publications. This is an interesting one, and I think it's unique to Edina. I've been here a long time now, 25 years. And when we do that annual quality of life survey, I keep thinking, this is going to be the year that the website is more important to our residents to get city information than our publications. And even though we've had a website since 1999, it's still not there. Word of mouth is always #1 and probably always will be #1. But the other tools are active communications tools, things that come directly to a person that they have to do something with. So that's going to be print publications, direct mail, email, text, things that come to a person. We are not an entertainment website. Your friends and neighbors are not going to come to the city of Edina's website to just see what's going on in their local government. When we've done some work with ascendancy research on our website, they're all blind studies. People come in and we say, what do you expect to find on your city's website? And they say things like, when are you going to pick up my garbage? And when are the 4th of July fireworks going to be? That's the general experience people have with their local government, unless something's really in their backyard, right? So it's important for us to focus on those active communications tools. So print publications, we produce an annual report about town that for a long time was produced as a magazine. And then during COVID, we discontinued it as a quarterly magazine, and it's just become an annual report. We produce Edina as a newsletter that comes out every month of the year. There are a few issues that are double issues, 8 pages instead of 4. Pa mentioned one being the popular annual financial report in the summer. The other 2 publications that our department produces that are mailed to every mailbox in the city are the Public Works Pipeline for the Public Works Department. They drive the content for that publication. They tell us what they want in it. We simply edit it and make it look good and send it out. The other is the Parks and Rec catalog, the activities directory. That one comes out 3 times a year. We also produce one other publication that does not go to every mailbox in town, and that's the Senior Center newsletter. That only goes to subscribers of the newsletter, and the Senior Center handles the mailing component for that one. Another bucket of work is video production. We were probably the last major metro city to be filming our meetings of city council and some boards and commissions. When this building opened in 2004, the sitting city council at that time said, we're going to start televising our meetings at that time. And so since 2004, when this building opened, we've been doing that. That's the bread and butter of our video production. We didn't start doing it ourselves until 2006. The first 2 years we contracted with the city of Bloomington. They came in and provided staff for us to do that. Now we provide that service to the Metropolitan Airports Commission. We film all of their meetings for them. And then we are also on contract with other cities for special projects, including the city of Eden Prairie and the city of Hopkins. Besides the meetings that we televise, we create some original programming for Edina TV. We create short videos and reels for social media and the website. We create internal training videos. And if a group comes to City Hall or another city facility and would like that event taped, things like candidate forums, we do that. We charge them for that service, and then we provide them with the media for them to air or broadcast in their own ways. Another part we've already talked about a lot is administering the public and education access channels for Edina, Eden Prairie, Hopkins, Minnetonka, and Richfield, and supporting the access producers who live in those 5 cities. That's, besides fielding those Comcast complaints, that's the other part of Dan Carpenter's job as community television administrator. Digital communications is a big and it's a growing part of communications. You know, when I went to college, we were taught you need to know how to do radio, TV, and print, and you've got the world by the tail. There are so many communications methods today, and the digital realm is where we're seeing new vehicles, new methods being introduced each and every day. And probably if we went around this room today, each one of you would have a different first choice for how you want to receive your news and information. So that for us, that means we're administering the city's primary websites, EdinaMN.gov and BetterTogetherEdina.org, including e-commerce on our primary website. We also have a website for employees. We administer the city's social media channels, and we oversee the city's email and text subscription programs. Beginning in April of 2026, we have federal ADA requirements for our digital communications. So this goes from just best practice and industry standard to having some federal law around how we provide those services. For advertising and marketing for general fund activities, first, we do sell some advertisements. Our department oversees a contracted advertising sales representative who sells the dasher boards at Braemar Arena, golf cart ads, advertisements in the senior center newsletter, anything that we want to advertise or sell sponsorships for. She's a single point of contact for the business community. Last year, she sold about $200,000 in those advertisements for the city. But we also create our own ads for general fund activities. A lot of those are, we're not looking to sell a product in the general fund, but things like the carry-out bag fee, that was a marketing campaign. All of the materials related to the referendums on the local option sales tax, those are other examples of that. Others are traffic safety, crime prevention, fire prevention, those types of campaigns fall into that work. And then internal communications is really in all 5 of those buckets, but I do call it out because we have a lot of employees, and to retain employees and keep them happy here, and you heard that a lot through these presentations, that we've got to retain employees, we've got to make sure they're getting information they need to feel good about and make a connection to the city of Edina. Okay, so what are some other things I want to share with you? Again, I want to point out that not all of our 1% comes from the general fund. All of our video production equipment is paid for with PEG fees. The cable TV bills have 2 charges. There's a cable franchise, and then there's these PEG fees that we collect. The cable franchise fees just go into the general fund, but the PEG fees under that contract have to be spent for broadcasting equipment. So we sort of set that aside so that we have that piggy bank. So when we need to purchase equipment for video production, or we need to retrofit the council chambers, that sort of thing, that money exists for that reason. Again, Dan's salary, half of that is paid by the commission. We do have some other small revenue sources in the form of video production services and a tiny bit of sales from Edina branded merchandise and history books. Again, I want to point out that this is every day some new thing pops up, right? Is the city going to get on Threads? Is the city going to start blogging on Reddit? Are we going to do this? Are we going to do that? So we're constantly looking at those things and seeing where our residents are and where we get that return on investment. It's also important to note that traditional media is shrinking. We do rely on the media to get out a lot of information. We issue a lot of press releases. A lot of our press releases are picked up. But the size of your local newspaper, the size of even your regional newspaper is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And in some parts of even the metro area, there isn't a local newspaper anymore. So my peers in other parts of the country are finding that residents are looking more and more to their city to provide news. We're well positioned for that. We're strong writers. We're already producing a lot of content. But I think that trend's going to continue. It's also important to note that other than word of mouth, there are no free ways to communicate. Everything we do costs staff time at a minimum, but even things like social media, sure, it's free for us to have a social media account for the city, but because of our records retention requirements, we have to subscribe to a service that's archiving that data for us so that if we get a records retention request, we can respond to that in a quick manner instead of going through years and years and years of posts and comments. Just this week, we found that because of our success on social media, we've been paying about $5,000 a year for that archiving solution for all of our social media accounts. Because we're seeing so much activity, they want to double that because we're seeing so many people comment. It's not just the number of our posts, it's the number of comments or engagement on that post. So Brittany's been working really hard this week to renegotiate that since we don't have another $5,000 to give them. But it's just an example, like people think social media is free, but we do have associated expenses with that. We also find people say, well, just post it on social media, that's free. Post it, post it, post it again, post it again. But the more we post, if there's not engagement, that hurts the algorithm, so then other people don't see our posts. So we have to be very strategic about when and where we post. Translation services are not cheap. Several years ago, as part of our DEI effort, we began translating our major publications in Somali and Spanish. We do have a limited English proficiency policy that requires that any vital document, like a form that someone needs to fill out to get a service, that we translate into any language that that person speaks so that they can get service. Translation services are based by the word, so it just depends how long the document is. But no departments really budget for translation service, but it's a growing need in our community. You'll see like the school district has its website translated, I think, into 5 languages now. We're still just focusing on Spanish and Somali. We're really committed to this. We think it's important. We're seeing those QR codes on the publications increase each year, the number of people who are accessing in those languages. And then finally, I just point out that though the city services and projects have continued to grow and we're supporting all of that new stuff, our staff size has remained stable the last 5 years. Any questions? Excellent. Thank you for your time.
And that brings us to the next steps, which is the end. So this process, we want you to process the information that you've received. There's a lot of it. We're going to email this out to you guys all. I did upload this whole presentation onto the website as well, so that if anybody from the public wants to get it and dig in. We're going to ask you, I'll reach out and I'm going to send this all in an email so you guys don't need to remember everything, but to provide up to 5 areas each that you want to focus in on and learn more about. The reality is we've spent a lot of time on this. There's no way for us to get to the depth of really digging in without narrowing the scope a little bit. And so we're going to ask that, and then during this month interim until we get to retreat in March, we're going to get that back from you. Scott's going to review it, and he's going to go through and he's going to say, maybe all 5 of you all agree on here's the top 5. I doubt that's going to be the case. But maybe there's actually 25 items that we receive. So Scott's going to then narrow down based off of what he thinks will have the most budget impact. So maybe you're going to pick something and it's actually, by cutting it, it might actually increase cost because that's something we charge for the service for. So we're going to try to narrow you down a little bit in that way. So we'll combine that, and then we're going to bring that list of Scott's recommendations to the March retreat. You guys then will talk about it. If you disagree with what Scott's recommending and there's one of them that you really want that didn't show up on the list, that's the time for us to kind of figure out what those things are. Then we're going to deep dive into whatever those areas are. It might take time. The reality is depending on if you picked 5 things that are all parks and recreation, guess what? Perry's team is already really busy with a lot of last projects. He's going to have to prioritize, and it's going to take some time in order to be able to get you the data and information that you need. So we'll kind of figure out what a schedule looks like to be able to narrow in to get you the information that you need. Then we'll have another conversation in May after March. So this is going to be an ongoing conversation. On the back end, just as a reminder, our staff is all going to start working on actually putting together their operational budgets. So we haven't started that part yet, so we can't really give you the exact numbers of things. These people haven't looked at what their contracts are, how those contracts are going up, any of that other stuff yet. We won't really have that data and information even internally. We start to gather it in May, in May is when we start to gather it, then we combine it. We really produce that document in about July, and that's just the reality of timing. But we're going to continue this conversation with you because there are big, significant areas like debt service, stuff like that, that we're going to dig into that really play a big impact in how we see our projections. Do you guys have questions before we end? Anything that you want to see? Yeah.
So that's not what I thought we were doing.
Okay.
I don't think it makes sense to ask us which 5 areas we should look at to reduce costs. If you're saying give you 5 areas that we want to learn more about, and that's what you said at first, that makes sense. But I would rather the departments, meaning Scott, come back and say, now that we've shown you everything, here is how we think we get to our target.
I agree with James entirely. And I mean, we've heard a lot of information, but to put it on us to say, I mean, and I get the idea, like there might be 5 areas we're curious about, but that should not lead the process at all. It's,
Because we were given this data, the overviews without the data, right? And so I think that that's probably a big part of it is, let's give where we have questions, focus a lot of the conversation on that, but then also pair it with your recommendations.
Okay, yeah.
Can you say that again?
We'll still identify like what are the areas we want to learn more about.
Yeah.
But then Scott's coming back to us
Okay.
with the recommendations.
Okay.
So kind of marrying the
You're
two.
going for the
Yeah.
twofer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
more info.
Because at the end of the day, I love my colleagues, but we don't know how to save $4 to $5 million out of this budget. I mean, you've given a couple of examples of, well, I'll use one that we've talked a lot about. We get emails where people say you're wasting money on Edina liquor. You should sell it or get rid of it. Well,
Can't do that.
you can't do that, right? And two, it's still funding some of these other services. So if we don't have it,
Net profit.
right. And so there are just intricacies like that we don't know. And so I would much rather you come back with, here's how we think we can get there. And then we can have the conversation around, all right, then what does that mean? What's the experience that people are gonna have? And then have a discussion around that.
Can I ask a question? Because there's 4 of you here, not 5, so this is not binding or anything. But when you say how we get there, what do you guys mean as a group when you say how we get there? Because I just want to know, are you all in the same place about what there is, or are we making up what the there is?
That's a really good point, and I kind of want to focus, I mean, we did see the 1% reduction that was proposed, and we approved that at our last meeting. And I kind of feel like this could be a starting point for kind of figuring out where the bar is going to be, because I'll be honest, when I look at eliminating the cost for the elections, that just, I don't understand how that could even be considered a way to reduce the budget, because it was a cost that shouldn't have even been included in the budget. And so if it was, not something that was relevant anymore, removing it from the budget seemed nonsensical to me, and I'm still trying to understand that. But we need to figure out how to get to there, which is, we're looking at 17% increase in property taxes.
We're not.
And, well, that's what the projection is. And so, and I know there are a lot of people on fixed incomes, and it's really, beginning to compromise. You talk about affordable housing. Well, for a lot of people, it's becoming out of reach because of property taxes and, all the years that it keeps coming. So, I'm going to stop because I don't really know where I'm headed. But you inspired me, James, so you have to pick it up.
I gotta be clear, though, we
Yeah.
are not proposing a 17% increase in the general fund levy for next year. We're just not. That was a demonstration of a working tool, but we're not gonna make that. We haven't made a recommendation to you yet, so that's not coming.
Yeah. So I
That figure's
also
out there,
get, I
though.
get
Yeah.
both points there. And so I'm glad to hear you repeat that. I would have said, we did propose 17%. It was in the presentation. However, we also said, there's no way that's sustainable, and we're gonna do all of this work to figure out what that's gonna be.
Right, just, I don't want to parse the word propose too much.
Yeah.
But we didn't propose that, but what we showed you is what would be necessary from a general fund tax levy standpoint if we went forward with all the services at the service levels that we have.
100%. And that led to this process.
Yeah.
And we said, we're gonna go through this now rather than waiting to the fall. So I think we're all on the same page there. When you ask the question, I would say we're talking about the general fund, right? You talked about other revenue sources, those are great. But we're talking about what impacts that 8.44% for this year. So that's the general levy. And I've mentioned this before, I just did back of the napkin, and I said I felt like we needed to reduce by $5 to $7 million. But that's just on the back of a napkin. I said, well, tell us how to get there. And the there for me was to be in alignment with our sister cities, which I think means that budget needs to be somewhere between 8 and 9%. But I'm also saying, I don't know how to get there, because the last budget I led for Cargill was $250 million. And if somebody told me to reduce that by 20%, I could do that. But that's because I knew the services. I don't know these services to that same degree of intimacy. So it's really difficult for me to be able to say to you, if you force me to do it, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna start at the ones that have the biggest share. And that is the most asinine thing to do. But that's what that's the only way I'd be able to do that. And then you'd have to come back and tell me, well, here is what doesn't make sense. So I would much rather you come back with, here's how we get there. And there is what I have in my head.
All right.
And there is something I have been thinking about that I think is proving costly and very ineffective for the city of Edina, that I can send an email about that topic. So I guess, I do have something to contribute that I think could actually be relevant. But I wholeheartely agree with what James is saying. And I think it would be reckless to put us in the driver's seat of this endeavor, really. But we can contribute, and we are the link between the community. And so, people out there listening, if you have ideas, please contact, and let us know. And I would visit with anyone who wants to sit down and talk about the budget and their ideas. But going back to the mission, we're supposed to be providing sound public infrastructure, premier public facilities, and I think that's got to stay in our heads as we go through this process. And we are so far behind on deferred, we've got so much deferred maintenance that does literally keep me up at night. So.
And I think that's why, for me, it's hard to put a number on it. I know I don't want it to be 17, right? But to even say something like in line with our sister cities, that can be hard too, because we have so many very large capital improvement plan items that are right in front of us. And so it might not be feasible, or I guess is the answer, we might have to cut a little bit more steeply into some of those services. So it's going to be a trade-off balance regardless.
It is.
So it's some of that layer of information that I think would be helpful.
Well, one thing I can say unequivocally, if you don't start, you can't finish. And so I'm sitting here saying, the number in my head is between 5 and 7 million. What Member Agnew just said is completely true. But I just feel like if we don't have some kind of target, then we're never going to get there. And so I'm totally cool if you come in and say, this is what the target needs to be. but we don't have that. And we gotta force everybody to be reasonable. And I'll just share this. In the council, when we voted on the 8.44, right, we had the Lewis Ridge in there. And I said, hey, if I wanna do Lewis Ridge too, but we can't afford it now. So if we're gonna do it, we gotta figure out how to fund it. And I got nasty emails and voicemail messages from people saying, you don't care about the kids. And did you hear anything I said? So we gotta be disciplined enough to have the conversation, and then we're gonna have to make tough decisions, as well as the residents are gonna have to understand with some of the decisions we make, they're gonna experience something different. And we have to be able to articulate what that is. And it's just not, I mean, it's not a pleasant thing to do, but.
So we'll
That's what's in my
generate a
head.
target, or maybe a couple of them, and then associate that with a budget, kind of big line item kinds of things.
Yeah.
And just talk to you about what that means and what that might mean for the experience of living in Edina for people that are paying taxes here.
Yeah.
That's the approach I would take, is to run a preliminary budget forecasting next year with a 6% increase in revenue, 8%, 10%, maybe have three different options, or 9%, whatever the numbers are, but have several different options. And tell us what that looks like from a budgetary standpoint and how that potentially affects service. I think Kate made an interesting point, is that we know from the police and fire presentation we had on the 4th, a couple days ago, that particularly with respect to fire, that we do things that no one else does. And it's because our residents want those services. So you got the challenge of trying to figure out what to do around delivery of those services at the level people expect them at, and not maybe affect that budget as much as it affect the rest of it. So there are things that are at play here from a citizen demand standpoint that we need to be mindful of as we work on this budgetary pathway too. But in the defense of what James said earlier, I mean, I'm looking at you, Ari, because when we worked on the budget, you said, well, if you don't come in at 13%, then next year you gotta be at 17%. And that's when we said, no, we're not gonna, maybe I took that out of context from the way you meant it. But that was the message that was delivered to us, that if we wanted to deliver the same level of service and everything else, we're gonna have to be at 17%. Well, that certainly caught all of our attention, and we know that can't be, and we know that can't be. We gotta figure out what we're gonna do here. And we're not different from any other city. Every other city is facing the same problem.
Yeah.
The same challenge, escalating costs. Just the article, the Edition Edina, which was just a great article about the conversion of the equipment in public works to natural gas, I think it was. In there, you could see that to buy a replacement electric vehicle for something that we have that's been internal combustion powered was like 3 times the cost. So we really appreciate the fact that people are being mindful of those things and trying to figure out ways to do things in an economical way, while at the same time having, in that instance, a great reduction on greenhouse gas production by 100% reduction in greenhouse gas production. But after the conversion is complete, it's really quite a remarkable story. But it's a good illustration of what you can do when you start getting creative. And for me too, I'd look at the revenue side. Are there some other ways we can garner additional revenue that we haven't been thinking about? Something that's creative for a city that would help us.
And Ari,
You were going to say something earlier.
Yeah, you were working on a slide that showed the enterprise services against the FTEs. And you were doing that with, I'll say, the sister cities. I don't remember all the ones that were in there. But I felt like that set a really good context that would be great for the community in a broad sense to understand that you can't quite compare Edina to Eden Prairie or what have you, because we have regional services in here that we are funding from an FTE perspective. We run those services, but they do generate revenue, right? And so I think that that was a really good picture for people to see.
Yeah, Zoe's been working super, super hard on getting, like, super hard. When you see it, you'll understand the level of depth.
Yeah.
Because it's, I mean, this is, even getting the data, it depends on us getting it from our neighboring communities and then trying to figure out, okay, what is actually comparable and what isn't.
Yeah,
That's to come. We're still working on getting it updated for this year, but Zoe's,
Great.
Due diligence is super important.
we don't want to put the wrong
If it
thing
gets too
out.
sloppy, then we all start chasing each other around, trying to find the right numbers.
And then the last thing I had, Mayor mentioned it, I think the revenue side is huge. And so if you wanted us to send you some of these other ideas that we have, that makes a ton of sense. And so I have a few that I'll send.
So maybe that's what we'll do, is I'm gonna send a follow-up email with the presentation and then ask you for any of your thoughts, ideas. I might try to have you limit them down a little bit to not give me, 100 things, because he's got to figure out how to sort them all out by March.
I
and
got
so-
3 for you.
Okay, that's good. That's good. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you.